is Moonwater, and I'm with the Whatcom Dispute Resolution Center. We are a local nonprofit, and we provide impartial facilitation services. As a neutral third party, I will moderate the meeting tonight and guide us through the agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded in order to create a resource for folks that were unable to join tonight. So Jack, you can start the recording now. And
this meeting is being recorded.
Before we go much further though, I prefer to start any public meeting we are facilitating with a brief land acknowledgement. And although we are all in an online space right now, each of you and this project itself is rooted in Whatcom County, home to the Coast Salish people since time immemorial. I offer my respect and gratitude to the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe for their enduring protection of this land. And I invite each of you to reflect on this history and to seek ways to deepen your own knowledge and offer further recognition. Thank you. So tonight, this neighborhood meeting is being convened by the Lighthouse Mission Ministries in order to share information and answer questions about a redevelopment proposal the mission is working on with regard to their property at the corner of F and Holly Streets in Old Town. And while the broader issue of a citywide response to homelessness and this project are most certainly related, the presentations and the question and answer period which will follow them have been developed and are intended to focus on this particular project proposal tonight. My role as an impartial facilitator is to help ensure productive time together this evening and to support us to adhere to the agenda, and most importantly, help each of you who've taken precious time tonight to be here, to be able to participate, be heard, and support you to talk with the panelists to have your questions be answered. Ideally, this meeting would be convened in person in a room where you could all see one another and talk more informally together. But in the absence of being able to do that tonight, here we all are on Zoom, and we want to help make this as smooth as possible. I believe there are close to 100 folks here tonight, so thank you all so much for coming. And I recognize that some folks will come and go throughout the evening. I'll ask everyone for your patience as we navigate Zoom together and work to ensure that everyone can participate to the fullest extent. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to talk through some expectations around Zoom and get us all grounded before we begin. Please note that the chat is disabled and you as attendees can only receive chat messages from panelists, but you won't be able to send messages through chat to panelists or other attendees this evening. And the Q&A function, we're asking that you use that only for tech questions. If you're having difficulty participating in the meeting tonight, Jack is our tech support and he will assist you to ensure that you can be engaged. Let's see, if you have any suggestions or requests, if there's technical glitches that you're experiencing and you want to cue us, or if you're having trouble turning on your own audio or video during the Q&A period, we will do our best to support you. So just let us know if you're having difficulty and we'll make sure to assist. Please, we ask that you not use the Q&A function for project-related comments and questions. We're hoping to direct those all to some dialogue that will happen after some presentations. For those of you that might be newer to Zoom, please be aware that there's a raise hand function, and we're going to use that to help identify the folks that have questions this evening. So if you would like to speak following the presentations tonight, please click the raised hand function on Zoom, and that should be at the bottom of your screen typically. And if you're just calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand. So again, you can click the raised hand button typically at the bottom of your screen or tablet. And if you're calling in, please press *9 so we're alerted that you have a question that you'd like to ask. In terms of the process tonight for letting people speak and making sure that you can participate this evening, what Jack will do is we'll promote you to a panelist in the order that hands are raised. And so Jack will cue me about the next 3 people that are in the line or in the queue. I'll say your names and that will just give you some advance notice that your turn will be coming up soon. And then he'll invite you in one at a time as a panelist. You can turn your video on if you like. It's helpful for us to be able to see who the panelists are speaking with, but it's also your choice. If that's not working for you or you prefer to keep your camera off, you can do that. But please do unmute yourself I'll invite you to share your question. You can ask your question, and then one or more panelists will work with you to try to respond and answer your questions. And I'll give you another reminder about that shortly. So with us tonight, I'm going to take a moment to introduce the panelists that we have, and then share with you a little bit more about what to expect this evening. So here with us tonight, we have folks from the City of Bellingham and the Planning and Community Development Department. And we've got folks who work in sort of different branches of that department. So we have Kurt Nabefeld with the City Planning Department. He's the Development Services Manager. We have Anya Gedrath, who is a planner. And then on sort of another side, another branch of the department, we have Tara Sandin, the Community and Economic Development Manager, and Samia Letz, the Program Manager. So we have 4 folks from the city this evening. And then similarly, we have 4 folks from the Lighthouse Mission, the Director, Hans Erschinger Davis, Director of Advancement, Lauren Zenonian, the Associate Director, Bridget Reeves, and the Operations Manager, Justin Reeves. And then with AVT, the firm that the Lighthouse is working with for this project, we have Ali Tacey, the principal and owner at the AVT Consulting, and Jack Bloss, project manager. So that's the team of folks that are here to share more information with you about the project. And then following those presentations, we'll have Q&A. But we will begin the meeting tonight with a presentation from city staff, followed by a joint presentation. I'm just going to pull my notes back up, making sure I've got this correct, followed by a joint presentation from Lighthouse staff and AVT Consulting. And then those presentations will be followed by a Q&A session, at which point you'll be invited to raise your hands, and I'll help facilitate you getting answers to the questions that are coming up for you. Some staff might need to depart beforehand, but my understanding is that we're going to try to keep the meeting open until 9 o'clock tonight to do our best to ensure that as many folks as possible can ask the questions that they have and have those be answered. And so we're expecting to move into Q&A by about 7 o'clock, I believe, or shortly thereafter. And so with that, I will turn it over to Tara and Samia to start the city presentation.
Thank you, Moonwater, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Again, Tara Sundin, Community and Economic Development Manager with the City of Bellingham. As Moonwater mentioned, we have 3 divisions in our department. We have the Development Services Division, which Kurt and Anya are in. We have the Long Range Planning and Community Development, or Long Range Division, and then we have Community Development. And that's where Samia and I are housed. And sometimes both the Community Development Division and the Development Services Division work on the same project. However, our roles are really different. So I wanted to just clarify those different roles. Development Services permits the project. Their job is to ensure that the codified process is followed and that the project meets code. And that's why they're here tonight. We aren't usually at these meetings, but we are tonight because of our role in housing and homelessness, but also in our role as a partner with the Lighthouse mission. Our role you could consider in this project kind of a partner light model, where we're anticipating that our role is going to help support the mission's investment in infrastructure surrounding the building, but not in the building, not in the operations of the building. And I'll touch on the difference with the interim base camp in a few minutes. So Sammy is going to provide you with a very brief overview of the continuum of housing strategy that we've adopted in this county. While we know that this meeting isn't focused on that topic, we thought it would be useful and helpful to some of you to let you know where this project fits in the context of everything that we're working on in the community. If the neighborhood's more interested, or if you're in a neighborhood that's more interested in a more thorough presentation, we'd be happy to make arrangements to explore the topic in the future. So after Samia presents, I will provide you with an overview of the many projects that we have underway or planned in the community that fit into the continuum of housing. And then I'll also describe our partnership with this interim base camp facility. So Samia.
Thank you, Tara. Samia Lutz, I'm the city's Housing and Services Program Manager. And as Tara said, I work with Community Development Division. And I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of our approach to housing and services in the city. And Jack, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the slides that we gave you. Great. So part of what I do is manage a 5-year consolidated planning process that really addresses the needs of the low-income folks in the community. And we really strive to support a continuum of housing and services. And that really ranges from those who might be experiencing homeless and have no income, or seniors earning less than $1,500 a month, to families with 3 folks earning up to $5,000 a month. All of these folks are or could be severely cost burdened in our city, spending over 30% of their income on housing costs and really struggling to make ends meet and potentially vulnerable to homelessness in our city. I do also want to say that Whatcom County is a close partner of ours. They are really the lead agency in our region for addressing homelessness. If you're interested in this issue broadly, I would very much encourage you to look at their 10-year plan to end homelessness called A Home for Everyone, or to address homelessness, excuse me. We all wish we could end it, but it's a 10-year plan to address homelessness. And we work very closely with them as a partner in these efforts. And we like this slide in particular because it depicts the visibility of those who are unsheltered, as well as the needs of those across the whole continuum. Next slide, please. And this next slide parallels that same continuum of housing, where we have the folks who are experiencing homelessness and needing those kinds of services on the left, all the way up to home ownership on the right. And this one talks about the different specific ways that the city is involved to support the strategies all along this continuum. So that's everything from supporting small specialty shelters that might be targeted specifically just to families with young children or to folks with a mental health diagnosis. And then all the way through transitional housing, public housing, private rental market housing. We partner with the Opportunity Council and other agencies that might master lease units or provide rent assistance like the Housing Authority does throughout our whole community. And we also support supportive services for folks who need those. And then I already mentioned home ownership. Next slide, please. So this one is really about all of the agencies in our community that serve folks who might be experiencing homelessness. And we really have a rich array of nonprofit agencies in our community that do this work. Very blessed for that. This is not an exclusive picture of all the agencies involved, but it's the ones that are partners in our coordinated entry system or our homeless service center and housing pool referral system. So we have a coordinated way to make it as easy as possible for folks to ask for assistance and get the assistance they need. The Lighthouse mission is very much aware of and involved in this, and is referred to other programs, or their clients are referred to other programs in this whole continuum. So some of these folks, like the Housing Authority, Mercy Housing, may only dedicate a few units in projects that they build to folks who are homeless on entry. Other agencies may exclusively serve folks who are experiencing homelessness or exiting homelessness, but all of them are involved and coordinated in this system. And I'm going to turn back to Tara for the next slide, but just let you know that I am going to have to leave this meeting early, but very open to folks following up with me by email if they have questions about these broader issues.
Thank you, Samia. So we put this next visual together to show you some projects that we're currently working on or that we're planning right now. This visual does not describe everything we have in our community. We have over 400 shelter beds dispersed throughout our community, and that's not the highlight tonight, but wanted to talk to you about what we've kind of got in the works. So the one to the north in King Mountain neighborhood is Cultion Community Land Trust, and they are building homes for people to purchase, and that project is underway. And I'll just mention that all of these projects, with probably the exception of one, the city is a financial partner in, and or sometimes we're a financial funder, but we're also partnering with some of our property. So we get a variety of federal sources in, including the Bellingham Home Fund and the recently passed sales tax initiative to help us partner up with these agencies. The second one there is Mercy Housing in Barkley. This is a project that we've been working on for a number of years, and we're very excited to see this one probably get off under construction in the next couple of months. Again, it's in Barkley, about 70 units for families with children. And as Sammy mentioned, we work with our housing developers to ensure that they set aside some units for people that are either in our shelter system or are unhoused or kind of defined as currently homeless. And so that will be a great benefit to the community. Number 3 there is in the Lettered Streets neighborhood. That is the Opportunity Council's Recovery House. And this is a small project, but a really important one for our community. We'll have 16 units for people that are receiving drug and alcohol treatment. The Opportunity Council up with Lifetime Services. They have the expertise to operate this type of facility. Number 4, of course, is the topic of tonight's meeting. Number 5 there is the interim location for base camp. And hopefully most of you are aware that over this past year plus now, the city and the county worked with the Lighthouse mission to relocate them out of Old Town due to COVID. They were in a situation that was not safe, way too small and inadequate to meet the spacing needs. And so we relocated the program to the high school and then found a little bit longer term site at Cornwall Avenue. This is a different type of project, a different type of partnership with the city and the county than what the mission has planned in Old Town. But we stepped in to help them out financially with that additional cost that they were not planning on for leasing this facility and upgrading it. We signed a 4-year lease. Actually, it's a 3-year lease with 1-year extension. And that was anticipation of COVID, but also we knew that the Lighthouse mission needed to find a permanent location and build a permanent facility. This has been on our radar for several years now. And so that's why we signed that agreement. But we do need to, we're coming up on 1 year, so we have a little over 3 years for this program to move to a new location. Let's see. Number 6 was recently announced. This is a really exciting project between and kind of led by Unity Care and Peace Health in close coordination and partnership with Whatcom County. And this facility will do a couple of things. It will supply the much needed respite beds that we really don't have an adequate supply of. So this is for people that are exiting the hospital and don't have a home. And it's probably not the best place to go back to a shelter that doesn't have the right type of medical treatment, but they don't need to be in the hospital. This has been on our radar for many, many years, and we're excited that they've just received a big amount of funding that's going to help them probably be underway in the next year. This facility will also have hygiene services. So base camp, the interim facility, has a lot more hygiene services than we've ever had in the community for our unhoused population, and that will continue. You'll hear more about that from the mission tonight. But this will be another location for people to access showers and laundry and medical services. Mercy Housing is also working in the waterfront district. That's number 7 on the map. They have teamed up with the Whatcom Community Foundation, working with the Port of Bellingham on housing development. They haven't identified what demographic yet, but they do know that they'll be looking at around 70 units or so, and also have a child care facility, same as Berkeley, have a child facility there. Let's see, Opportunity Council is working in the Sea Home neighborhood with Whatcom County on a site that Whatcom County owns to build a senior housing development there, also coupled with childcare. And then we have Homes Now. Homes Now is, I've got 2 locations in our community, one number 9 at Jerry Field and the other number 13 in the Fairhaven neighborhood. So you have Puget neighborhood and Fairhaven, about 50, maybe a little bit more tiny homes for the Homes Now. Lydia Place, also in the Puget neighborhood, is building Heart House, and this will serve up to 11 families. Also, a childcare facility is planned there. And then the city is working with the Low Income Housing Institute, along with a local Road to Home nonprofit, to build a tiny home village called Garden View. And then finally, although we've been working on this one probably the longest, is the Bellingham Housing Authority's Samish Way complex. I heard that they received their temporary occupancy permit today for phase 1. 69 units will come online for families. Phases 2 and 3 will serve seniors and singles. And again, this one, even in this first phase, I believe they've set aside 14 units to move families with children into. So we wanted to provide this little snapshot. These are projects that are in the works or planned. And we've got a couple more that we're working on as well. And at this time, I will turn it back over to Moonwater. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Samia. So hopefully that gave everyone the big picture of some of the context that the project you're about to learn more about sits within. So with that, I will turn it over to Ali and the Lighthouse mission staff for their presentation.
Thank you, Moonwater. And thanks, Tara and Samia, for talking about the bigger picture. My name is Ali, and I am with AVT Consulting. We are a local land use consulting company in Bellingham. We assist folks with planning, permitting, and project management associated with various types of development in town. And we are working with the Lighthouse mission to help facilitate their planning and permitting process and their design process to ensure that they can bring a project forward that's in compliance with all of the applicable regulations and facilitate interface with the community in forums such as this, and also with the city of Bellingham, particularly the division within planning that Kurt and Anya represent, who will be doing the permit review. So I'd like to welcome everybody tonight and thank you all for attending. I know that Zoom is not an ideal format for this kind of interface and dialogue, but in light of the circumstances of the past year, this is what we're stuck with. And so we're going to do our best to try and engage in a way that we would in a normal meeting, and particularly in the question and answer session where we're all prepared to try and answer questions that do come up. And so I'm going to spend a little time talking about the property and then the proposed project. And then I'm going to turn over the mic to the Lighthouse mission team to talk a little bit about the programming that's planned for this new facility. And then I'm going to take back over and talk a little bit about the permit process that we're entering into to try and lay that out for everybody. And then if there's follow-up questions that are generated as a result of our presentation, we can answer those as we go once we get into that. So I do have some slides to share as well. And so Jack, let's start with our vicinity map, and I'm going to work from big picture down toward the site. So this is a aerial photograph of the core area of Bellingham. The proposed property for redevelopment is the red rectangular box. Many of you are familiar with the site. It's on the corner of Hawley Street and F Street. It's located within kind of our Old Town area. And it currently has the existing mission facility located on it. You can see here it's adjacent to our waterfront area. It's close to downtown. It's also very close to the Columbia and Leonard Streets neighborhoods. Jack, if you can zoom in a little bit, the next slide. So this is a slightly zoomed in aerial photograph. This helps people understand some of the infrastructure that's around the site. The property does front on 3 public rights-of-way. Hawley Street, F Street, and Astor Street are all platted public rights-of-way. Hawley Street is an arterial street. It's improved with full travel lanes, some street parking, curb gutter, and sidewalk. F Street is also improved with full travel lanes, curb gutter, and sidewalk. And Astor Street is improved to a lesser standard today. Astor Street is really improved to what we would describe as a minimum standard, which is just asphalt drive lanes, but no curb gutter or sidewalk. And within those streets, there are a number of public utilities. On this map, the blue lines that you see are public water mains. And so you can see that there's quite a bit of water main infrastructure around the property. There are water mains in all 3 frontages. And there is an existing water service to the Lighthouse mission facility, which is represented by a small teardrop located on Hawley Street. The green lines are sewer mains, public sewer mains. And so you can see that there are public sewer mains located in F Street and Hawley Street. So there's a lot of public sewer infrastructure adjacent to this site as well. And the pink lines are stormwater infrastructure. And so those pink lines represent stormwater conveyance facilities. These are below ground pipes that capture stormwater from the roads and some of the developed properties in the vicinity, and then route that ultimately out toward Bellingham Bay. You can see here the immediately surrounding development as well. And I would note that the buildings to viewers kind of bottom left with the 923 and 909 address designations are representative of the New Life Center. This is another building that's part of the Lighthouse Mission campus. And I think Lighthouse Mission folks are going to talk a little bit about their properties. And then the property to the upper left from that with the 1215 address is another facility that the Lighthouse Mission operates. And the building just immediately to the upper left of that with the 1013 address on Hawley is the former drop-in center facility, which is the facility that then moved to base camp location that Tara mentioned earlier. And Jack's hovering the hand over that. So that's a little bit of perspective on the immediate surrounding infrastructure. You can also see that there's fire hydrants on all 4 corners of this block, and the property really encompasses 1/2 of the block bound by D, F, Astor, and Hawley Street. Jack, if you could go to the zoning map. This next slide is a map of the Leonard Streets neighborhood zoning. The property is located within the Leonard Streets neighborhood. It's in area 10 of the Leonard Streets neighborhood, which has a commercial zoning designation. It should be noted, though, if you look at this table that we've outlined in red above, that under the special regulations section, there's a reference to the Old Town Overlay District. And so the Old Town Overlay District is a zoning overlay that covers portions of the Leonard Streets neighborhood and the city center neighborhood. And it has its own set of development standards and regulations that govern height, bulk, mass, setbacks, permitted uses, things like that. So there's a secondary layer to this zoning beyond just what the general commercial standards require and the Leonard Streets neighborhood requires. And you can see it's kind of right there in the middle of the commercial zoning in area 10. And I will talk about code compliance and when I talk about the permit process in a little bit. If you can jump back, Jack, to the utility aerial, I just want to talk briefly about the existing structure. The existing mission building is a 3-story structure. It's approximately 15,000 square feet in total floor area. It was built in the 1970s. And it includes parking lots on both the Astor Street side and the Hawley Street side. It's really built out close to the property lines on the F Street side. It's a concrete and wood structure. It's reached, to a certain degree, reached the end of its effective life. And the proposal that I'll talk about in a moment includes complete demolition of this structure and redevelopment of the entire site. Jack, if you want to jump to the floor plans. So I'm going to talk through each floor here in a little bit of detail. I'd just like to recognize and acknowledge that this is very early in our process. One of the very first things we do is have a neighborhood meeting. So this is not a final plan, but it is a very well-developed plan. And after this meeting, we're going to continue working with the design team on refinements to this plan, and ultimately present a full final proposal for city review with our permit and for public review. So this is close but not final. And so I'm going to go through each floor, but know that there could be some changes as we move through this. Here you can see kind of the profile of the building. It's a 5-story structure. The site is sloped with the low side on Hawley and the high side on Astor. And so what that means is that the building will be buried into that slope in a what I would describe as a daylight basement style, so that the ground floor that you see here, the first floor on Hawley, will present as a full height structure. But by the time you reach Astor Street, that structure will actually be almost completely buried. And that line Jack's hovering over will actually be a little bit higher. And the primary entrance to the building you'll see will be on the second floor. So I'd like to jump over to the first floor plan, and I'm going to run through the plans real quick. So some of you may not be able to read this this text, and so I'm going to try and walk everybody through each of the rooms. This is the ground floor, so the basement floor. You can see the references to Hawley, F, and Astor. And so for your plan view purposes, Hawley Street is on the left, Astor Street is on view right, and F Street is on the top. You'll see that we are proposing to retain the existing curb cut to Hawley Street. That curb cut will enter the site and then access a small below grade parking lot. That parking lot or parking garage will be buried underneath the building into the slope. It will contain 7 parking stalls. That parking facility is not intended to provide all of the parking necessary for the project. Additional parking will need to be provided off-site. And we can answer questions about that. And Justin from Lighthouse Mission may speak about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But that parking is primarily for handicap accessibility, short-term people traveling to the site, also potentially for Lighthouse Mission vehicles that are doing deliveries and those types of activities. On this ground floor, starting on the Hawley Street side, we'll be proposing 3 commercial tenant spaces. So you can see these here. These are going to be small business suites. And again, Lighthouse Mission will talk about this in more detail, but the intent for these spaces is to facilitate entrepreneurial business and entrepreneurial development for the guests of Lighthouse Mission. And so the goal, which I'm sure Hans and Lighthouse Mission will talk about in more detail, is to try and provide space for guests and members of the program to develop small business skills and maybe operate small businesses in these spaces or contribute to small businesses that are operating in these spaces. These 3 spaces will also contribute to consistency with the Old Town design standards, which require commercial storefront development along our primary arterials. And so they'll provide a commercial storefront facade and a consistent feel with the design that will occur with other buildings that develop in the Old Town area. Behind these, as you work back into the slope, there is a large facilities maintenance room, several small offices, mechanical and electrical rooms, kind of the guts of the building, and then a large storage room, which will be to store food products and other supplies that the Lighthouse Mission utilizes in the building. There's also a large kitchen bulk storage and a loading and unloading area adjacent to the garage. So this is kind of like the guts of the building down here. there will be an elevator in the building that will serve all floors. And you can see that there, actually 2 elevators, pardon me. One that Jack's circling there up near the commercial spaces and one near the back of the building. Jack, if you can jump to the 2nd floor. This is where we move into more of the program spaces. This floor is the floor that will have an elevation equivalent to Astor Street. And so this is where the primary entry to the building will be located. The primary entry will be located effectively on the corner of F and Astor Street. Jack, if you can zoom in a little bit there and then scroll over, it'll be easier for folks to see. So you'll see here check-in facilities, a main entry vestibule, and that space will lead directly into a large interior day room. This is a significant space intended to facilitate intake and transfer of folks off the street into the building in a more efficient manner so that we don't have too significant of queuing in the public right away. There'll also be small offices, libraries, and a number of bathroom facilities on this floor, including some shower facilities. So this will be an area where all the residents or guests can congregate. This space connects directly to what you see in the plan left portion of your view, the exterior covered day space. And so it's very important to have outdoor space for guests to congregate in that's not in the public right of way. And so the building incorporates a several thousand square foot covered exterior day space. This will be elevated 1 story above the Hawley and F Street grades. So it'll create some separation between that space and the pedestrian sidewalk. And so this main floor is primarily devoted to intake, some administrative space, and these recreation areas. And Jack, if you scroll to screen right, I'd also like to note a few other small spaces. The commercial kitchen and the laundry for the building will also be contained on this floor. And so there'll be a common laundry space, a large commercial kitchen, which will be able to facilitate all of the cooking that's necessary for Lighthouse mission. And then also immediately off the main entry is a medical clinic space. And again, the Lighthouse mission folks can talk a little bit about programming, but it's important to have space for partners in this building so that the people that the Lighthouse mission partners with to provide services have space within the building right on that main floor to engage in some of their activities. Between the building and Astor Street, there'll be a setback area, which will include outdoor secure bike storage, a garden space for residents, and the garbage facilities. And so garbage pickup will occur on Astor Street. There's a curb cut there for that access, and a garden and bike storage facility will be placed there. This will create a little bit of separation. The development to the northeast across Astor Street, which is a little bit more small scale in nature. So that's the 2nd floor. As we move up, we're going to move into more of the program spaces for guests. So on the 3rd floor, there will be all of the administrative space for Lighthouse mission staff. So we'll be consolidating admin space in this building. That's the area that's in the dot hash that Jack is kind of outlining. And then adjacent to that will be the large chapel space. This chapel space is also intended to serve as an emergency shelter. So in situations where there's a greater need, inclement weather, natural disaster, things like that, there's additional space in this building for emergency shelter purposes. But this space is not intended to be utilized as a primary dormitory space. There'll also be an outdoor covered area facing Hawley Street on this level as well. So that you'll see on the rendering that I show you in a moment that there's 2 levels. In addition to that, more bathroom facilities. Let's jump up to the 4th floor, Jack. Okay, so the 4th floor is where the men's dormitory will be. This building will accommodate the low barrier shelter, the drop-in center or base camp, but will also accommodate other specialty programming. This floor includes men's dormitory space, as well as private dormitory spaces, a mental health dormitory, medical respite dormitory, and space for resident advisors as well. A number of bathrooms with showers, and another small exterior roof deck for folks to get outside. And then we'll go to the top floor. And similarly, the top floor is similarly programmed, but it is for women and families. And so you'll see there's a women's dormitory space, as well as a mental health dormitory, a medical respite dormitory, small 2-person spaces, an exterior covered roof, exterior roof deck that's covered, bathroom facilities, and then on the plan right view, a family dormitory with bathroom facilities. And so this building is designed to kind of provide separate private spaces for various user groups. And so that covers all of the floors in the building. The total floor area of this space is approximately 75 to 80,000 square feet. So it's quite a bit larger. It's planned for the realistic current needs, but also future needs in the community. So it is a big jump from what's there today in terms of square footage, but it is anticipating long-term future needs. So let's jump to the renderings. This will give everybody a little bit of an idea what the building is intended to look like from the exterior. This is a view standing kitty corner from the building on Holly Street. So if you were in front of the Agape Center looking at the building. And so you can see here the ground floor commercial spaces on Holly, the 2 exterior covered decks on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and then the upper levels, which will be administrative and dormitory space. And you can see that right now we're proposing a mix of exterior building materials, hardy panel siding on the upper levels, some vertical metal siding, and then also masonry at the ground floor. A lot of the exterior design components are incorporated to ensure compliance with the Old Town design standards. Jack, if you could just run through kind of slowly some of these other renderings, it'll give people some perspective on the way the building might look from different locations. So this is a good perspective because you can see how from Astor Street, the building will present as a 4-story structure, and from Holly Street, it'll present as a 5-story structure. The awning that you see on the plan left there on the corner of F Street that Jack's hovering around, that is the primary entrance to the facility. This is another view looking down F Street at the building. Bike storage, primary entry, garbage. This is a view of the building looking at it from Astor Street. You can see that the building is set back from the property line on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor. That's to allow windows on that space. The large gray wall that you see that's blank is built to the property line. That's anticipated to be built up against at some point in the future when the adjacent site is redeveloped. But in order to provide appropriate windows and light to the space, that those upper stories are set back, modulated back. And this is another view from Holly. You can see the garage entrance at this location. And this is just to zoom in on the commercial space. So you can see these 3 commercial tenant spaces there on the corner. So I'll be back in a moment to talk about the process that we're going to engage in, but I want to turn it over to the Lighthouse mission team to talk a little bit more about programming. And again, if we don't cover something that you, Hans, I'll turn it over to you to start.
Great, thank you, Ali. My name is Hans Searchinger Davis. I'm the executive director here at Lighthouse Mission Ministries. And it's always a joy to have conversations about this very important issue. And I know many of us come from different walks of life, different perspectives, but what a great joy it is to come together on this one issue of homelessness and talk through solutions. And here in Old Town, a real robust solutions being offered. So I'm going to speak in really broad brushstrokes about kind of the issues that we've been seeing, and then talk through the programmatic solutions that we offer and that we want to offer here in the future. So if you've been watching the news at all, of course, homelessness is front and center in our community. A lot of people are concerned about it. We had encampments at City Hall and different places around the city here recently. Caused a lot of consternation for folks. We've seen homelessness kind of ebb and flow over the years. I know I've been at this about 15 years, but we've also seen a lot happening in the community overall that brings attention to this issue. And some of the trends we've been noticing is a lot around seniors and medically fragile folks. And so one of the things that we really want to answer with this solution that we're presenting now is addressing those needs. We've also seen challenges with families showing up, moms in their minivans showing up at 8 p.m. on a Friday night. And since the mission's open 24/7, we're the place they come to, and trying to figure out where to put them. And we kind of hobble stuff together right now, and it works, but it's not the most ideal. And we would love to be able to provide a much stronger solution to that really crisis immediate need for families. Jack, if you could pull up that first slide on our our transformation continuum that we offer. So this is, I thought it'd be great to give you something to hang these programs on as to how we operate. So the mission is very much a Christian organization, but we also recognize that people have needs, and we don't want to discriminate against any of those needs. In fact, it's what drives our desire to help people that are in suffering places. And one of the most effective things we've seen for people to have a changed life is when people go through these different kind of levels of scaffolding, of transformation, and they come out the other end. I should say they start in this really suffering place, and then they come out the other side having a rich, full life that isn't just impacting themselves, but it impacts the community as a whole. And that's a great joy for us to see. So it starts with outreach for us. If you look on the left screen there, outreach is the programs that are developing trust and friendship and connection with people that are out on the streets. And these are mostly folks that are chronically homeless. This isn't the invisible homeless as much that you see that are just trying to keep a low profile. These are the folks you see in encampments and in those kinds of contexts. And we're reaching out with our shower trailer. We're reaching out with our vans, our Street Connect van, a new program on electric scooters with coffee backpacks for downtown Bellingham, as well as our base camp operation. We consider that outreach. And those fall directly in those categories. I'm going to show you an image a little bit, kind of what those look like in terms of scale, but we'll stay here for now. Those programs are designed to get people to a place where they're motivated to want to take next steps. It's a safe place. It's got all the resources you need. It's not the Taj Mahal. It's not a place you want to stay forever, but it's certainly a place where you know that you're going to be okay. And then you start to be able to dream again about what's possible. The second tier of this life transformation model is our recovery programs. We put a lot of resources into these recovery programs. This is where we get the most traction with people. This is where old men and women or moms with kids are bringing the deepest wounds from their life into the light to be healed. And you got to have that healing if you want to get away from whatever life dysfunction you're leaning on to escape the pain. You got to deal with that stuff. And that's what the recovery programs are designed to do. That's the Ascent Program for men. It's in the main mission building currently, and the Agape Home for women and moms with kids that are kitty corner across Holly Street from the main mission building. The third tier and final tier, we call it restoration. And this is the part where people, now you've got the healing under your belt. What comes next? This is getting people into places to live. This is potentially going back to school. This is getting your family back. This is the aftercare. This is the becoming marketable. This is getting a job. This is the being plugged into the community in significant special ways so you don't feel so alone. Whereas, and I would say this, loneliness is the chief pain on the streets when you are homeless. We find we're able to offer all three of these interventions or strategies or scaffolding to get someone to a place of life transformation. This is where we see our city change, and it's one of our great joys. One of the areas, I'd say we're really robust with our outreach. Our recovery is in a renaissance and doing exceptional. We have waiting lists to get into recovery right now. But our restoration is the area that we need to work on. Yeah, and part of the solution here in Old Town is really going to be able to meet that need. Jack, can you do the next slide? So just to give you a sense of what we're doing now, this is our internal continuum. Tara and Samia, they showed the external continuum that our whole community has, but this is the one that's internal to the mission. We work alongside that external continuum often. We support it, we're big fans of it, but this is here what we're doing at the mission. So currently base camp's at Cornwall Avenue. we have capacity. We can flex up to 200 people a night staying there, and probably an additional 100 people come in for meals and services, the clinics, all the various types of things that you want to access. All your case managers from other agencies are there. It's a great place to get your first step. Down in the bottom left of the screen, these are some of our outreach opportunities. We're having a laundry trailer built right now, so that'll be added to that here eventually. The old drop-in center on Holly Street was used this last winter. We were able to get up to 39 people in there if need be. That was our winter overflow in partnership with the church, Christ the King, that offered the volunteers to run that during severe weather time. From base camp, you can go either into the Ascent program for men or the Agape program for women. And these are really robust, tons of classes, tons of case management support, everything you can imagine that is going to help you heal from past wounds that have led you to a place of relational brokenness and not having a place to live. I should say too, we're doing at a high level of around 900 meals a day that are produced currently in the main mission building and then trucked over to base camp, and then Ascent and Agape come and eat there as well. I put the external continuum, that little kind of dashed arrow in there, just to show that not everybody goes through Ascent or Agape to get to a place where they're housed, but it's certainly something that we want to make sure that people have access to. And a number of folks do that and then bounce back, and we work with them again, and sometimes they want to choose the recovery programs as an option. Also this summer, we're starting our summit internship for people that want to work in this field. But as you can see here, we have upwards of over 300 folks that we can have capacity for currently in our different programs. And this is something that it's about half the homeless population of Whatcom County that we engage on a daily basis. I put the number 75 down by our outreach there in the bottom left. That's about what we can reach in a day with our outreach of people on the street. And our calculations show, at least for the mission as a whole, we have served through all these different tiers of services, upwards of 2,500 unique individuals in the last year. Our numbers show there's about 5,000 in our community. So we're hoping to be able to reach a whole lot more through these various tiers of intervention. Next slide, please. These are some of this is what we want to have added to this continuum that we think is really going to make a serious dent in homelessness in our community. We want to be able to basically double our impact, like I've said. You've already seen it in some of the drawings that Ali showed you. On the left here, I put them in red, the additions. We want to be able to add crisis family shelter to the continuum. We want to be able to add seniors and medical respite to the continuum. We want to be able to add specialized care, which is traditionally mental health type supports. And we also want to add the career development and business enterprise aspect to our continuum. We also want to be able to expand our winter capabilities. So the ability to reach more people in the wintertime when our numbers swell. This past November, we were turning people away. And it wasn't even that cold yet. And because of capacity needs at base camp. So to be able to flex and expand, as well as to be able to change as the needs change. Needs change significantly, or have changed significantly over the years. We want to be able to be flexible that way. So the red is the additions. Next slide, please. Eventually, we want to be able to double the impact for our men's recovery program, as well as our women's recovery program. That means we move the men's recovery program out of Old Town. We haven't settled on a site yet where that's going to happen. This is a few years out, of course. This isn't a part of the project we're talking about here, but just to give you a sense of things, we want to be able to reach more folks at that tier of intervention that really helps people that are suffering in homelessness. And again, that'll be outside of Old Town. You can go to the next slide if you like. You already saw the map a bit, but just for conversation, and you might want to come back to this if there's questions around this. We want to be what you see on here is the buildings that are surrounded in yellow. Those are properties that the mission owns. The properties surrounded in a dashed yellow line are properties that we lease. But as you know, the main mission building, that's the building here that's going to be talked about with this project. That's all I got, Ali.
Thank you, Hans. I'm sure there'll be questions in more detail, and I know that you are prepared, and the Lighthouse Mission team's prepared to answer those. So hopefully that gave people a general outline of what the mission provides in terms of services now and what they're proposing to provide in this new facility. I just want to note also, Hans on that last slide showed some of the other facilities. Part of this broader redevelopment plan is to make some changes to the New Life Center building and the Agave Center building across the street, including some facade improvements to try and create greater consistency between those buildings in terms of appearance on the street and the proposed building, as well as some tenant improvements within the New Life Center to facilitate some of the programs that are already in those spaces. And so those are small improvements relative to this project, but I do want to note that those will be going on as part of a separate permit process. And so I'm going to talk briefly about the process, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Moonwater to lead us into our Q&A, which is the primary purpose of this meeting. So Jack, if you want to throw the process slide up, and then I'll just walk through this a little bit with everybody. So what you'll see here is a general outline of the process that will occur for our permits. We're in the preliminary planning phase, which is identified on the left. And so what we typically start with is developing a project concept, a need from an organization or a property owner, and we collect data on the property, studies related to, in this case, soils, environmental contamination, survey, utilities, things like that. We build out base data so we can start developing a site plan. And then the design team works together with Lighthouse Mission team to develop a conceptual plan for the project. And that's kind of what we've done now. We then present that plan to the city in an informal pre-application meeting. And so that concept plan is provided to the city. That plan is then routed around to various city departments, public works, fire, planning, building services, all the relevant departments, parks, and then a meeting is scheduled between the project proponent and the city, and feedback is provided from those city departments in writing and in the meeting format to the team so that we can help refine the design and ensure that it's consistent with the applicable regulations. From that, we then move into a neighborhood meeting because the goal is to present the project to the general public, to the neighboring property owners as early as possible, understand the concerns that are raised by these folks, by all of you in attendance tonight. That's one of the main reasons the city's here, is to hear that feedback and then try and incorporate that feedback into the project application package. And so we're in what we call the preliminary planning phase. And when we finish the meeting tonight and then we have an opportunity to debrief, we'll move into the actual permitting phase. And so there's two primary sets of code that govern this proposal. Within the Old Town sub-area, projects are subject to design review in order to ensure that they're consistent with the Old Town design standards. And that code is Bellingham Municipal Code 20.35. That's the Old Town overlay. It's a sub-area plan. It was adopted by the city. And we will be ensuring through a design review application and a concurrent SEPA review that the project design and site design are consistent with the Old Town Development Regulations. SEPA is an acronym, State Environmental Policy Act. It's a checklist that is completed to evaluate potential impacts from the project to the environment: light, noise, dust, stormwater, critical areas, historic significance, anything that traffic, anything that really could be thought of as a potential impact. And so the city uses that to make a determination on whether mitigating conditions are necessary to address those impacts. And they ultimately issue a design review decision and a SEPA decision, and those are done concurrently. There's also a set of code which was recently adopted in 2020, and it's Bellingham Municipal Code 20.15A, and it's intended to address interim housing. And so that code section, the interim housing code, will lay out all of the requirements for review of the interim housing component of this, which is really the use. So if you'd like to think about it, one way to think about this is to say that the physical improvements and their aesthetic appearance their location on the site, height, setbacks, things like that are governed by 2035, the Old Town overlay. And then to a certain degree, there's some overlap, but the 20.15A code interim housing governs the use and how the use occurs. This proposal is considered a large facility. There are 3 tiers, small, medium, and large. In an urban village or in a commercial district like this, a large facility requires a type 3A process. That's a type of permit review process, and that is administered through a conditional use permit process. So interim housing is a conditional use in the Old Town district, and a conditional use permit is required to go through the type 3A process. And so what that means is an application will be prepared. That application will be filed with the city. It will include plans, an analysis of code compliance, all of the relevant studies and reports that go with the project. And then the city will do an initial review and determine if that application is complete. Once they've determined that application is complete, they will provide a notice of application. That notice of application is a document that identifies the public that the application has been determined complete, is in review, and it provides an opportunity for a public comment period to start. And so that green box that Jack's circling is the first formal public comment review for this project that will occur. And that will include a direct mailer to all of the property owners within 500 feet, which is the same radius that was presented for this neighborhood meeting. So if you received a direct mailer, you'll receive a direct mailer for that. It will include yellow signs on the site, our land use action signs, so that people will be aware that something is happening. That notice goes to the Bellingham Herald. It also goes to neighborhood association representatives and mayor's neighborhood advisory committee representatives. And we're including not only the neighborhood that the project's in, but also representatives from adjacent neighborhoods to ensure that the outreach goes beyond just the lettered streets. That public comment period occurs. The applicant and the city review that public comment, and the city provides feedback to the applicant on potential corrections that are necessary. And then ultimately, a portion of the project, the design review and the SEPA decision, move to a decision. And that's called the consolidated permit decision. An applicant has the option to separate those 2 administrative permits from the conditional use permit, which requires a public hearing. And so typically those 2 decisions are administered before the public hearing on the conditional use permit, after which there's an appeal period for those permits. And then the city moves the conditional use permit or the interim housing component to a public hearing in front of the hearing examiner. That public hearing also generates a notice, so people are made aware of it. And then a actual hearing is held. For the past 1.5 years, those have been held in a Zoom format, but the public can attend and make formal comment on the project at that time to the hearing examiner. Ultimately, the hearing examiner makes the decision on the project, and then that decision is subject to an appeal period. Once those permits are approved or denied or appealed, and we move beyond that, then a project applicant can move into a building permit process. And the building permit process is related mostly to more technical components, the architectural code compliance, the structural engineering, the energy code compliance, and the civil infrastructure that's necessary for the project. In this case, that civil infrastructure will include, and really that's it, because all of the water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure that I showed you in that earlier slide is already in place around the building to serve the building and is adequately sized to serve the building. That building permit process does not have a public participation component, although anybody can reach out to the city, and any application that is filed with the city is subject to public disclosure. And so if someone wanted to review the building plans themselves, they could request those from the city. The city is obligated to provide those, and they could make comment to the city on those, but there is no formal comment period. After a building permit is issued for the project, construction starts. This project is just now in this preliminary planning phase, but we do intend to move into the permitting phase fairly quickly because we are working with the city subject to the base camp lease, and there are some timing constraints that require us to move forward with this project in a timely fashion. So in the likely scenario, what we'll be seeing and what you all will be seeing is land use permitting occurring over the second half of this year, into the first quarter of next year, with building permit work occurring in the first and second quarter of next year, and construction starting in 2022. That's assuming the project proceeds. And that construction phase would occur over the following 12 to 16 months, depending on schedule, with occupancy occurring in 2023. So that's just kind of a big, broad strokes overview of the schedule and the permitting process. And again, we can answer more questions about that. And so it's 7:10. We've taken a lot of time to explain this. It is a complex project. There's a lot of components to it. So I am going to turn it back over to Moonwater in a moment to facilitate the Q&A. I just want to note now, though, that there are going to be follow-up questions, I'm sure, from members of the public. And we want to make sure that everybody has good resources to follow up. And so what Jack is going to do at this time is he's going to place several emails in the chat to all of the attendees. And those are going to be emails for our office and for the city project manager, Anya, and for the Lighthouse mission. And so if there is follow-up that people would like to do based on this, if you don't get a question answered, or if you have follow-up questions, we'd really like to give everybody who wants to ask a question a chance to speak. So we're not going to, we're going to try and get through everybody before we circle back to anybody. So if you don't have a chance to ask a second question, a good way to reach out is via email to get more information or ask a question about the project. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Moonwater.
All right, thanks, Ollie, and thanks everyone for staying with us and listening to the presentation. That was a tremendous amount of information to absorb, and I would imagine that there are a fair amount of questions and wonders coming up from folks. So we have the opportunity now to open the meeting up for your feedback and questions on what you've just absorbed. And I know that everyone here is hopeful for a helpful and informative question and answer period. And there's an avenue for follow-up if not all of your questions are able to be answered tonight, or if you feel discomfort in speaking your question tonight, please take Ollie up on that offer and follow up with folks in the via email. In order to be able to hear from as many folks as possible, as there are over 70 of you that have stayed and may want to speak tonight, I'm going to invite you to be mindful of time. There's no specific time limit. The intent is to create as informal of an environment as we would if we were in person, and there's certainly a desire for people's thorough questions to be answered and to be answered thoroughly. But please do be mindful of time and recall that there's a lot of folks who might like to speak tonight with their questions. So please share the space this evening. Please also listen carefully, as you have been, and you may have been taking notes as you went, but this will also help you track if your question has already been asked. And then we're asking, as you heard earlier, to try to focus your questions this evening on this particular project itself, as all of the folks here tonight and the panelists want to gather input in this preliminary stage and feedback from you, and to also be able to offer as much clarity and information specific to this project as possible tonight. And then lastly, as I know that you will, please bring your patience and courtesy as we work together for a smooth meeting in this Zoom format. And I'm going to be working with Jack to try to queue folks up, and I know it can take a little bit of time to unmute yourselves and share your video. So be patient with one another, be patient with yourself. We'll get you in and make sure that that you have a chance to ask your questions. So a couple quick reminders. The chat is disabled with the exception of some information that panelists are. I think that a few questions might have been captured in there. We're going to try to capture all questions tonight verbally so that everyone can benefit from the questions that you might have, because there's probably a lot of shared wonders that folks have this evening. So please only use the Q&A function tonight if you're having a technical difficulty, and Jack will help you with that support. And then if you want to put your question in writing and don't want to share it verbally in this format, please use the emails that have been shared. And then if you would like to speak, now would be a great time for you to use that raise hand function in Zoom, typically in the bottom of your computer screen or your tablet. And if you've called in tonight and want to be put in that queue, you can dial *9, and then we'll know that you'd like to speak. In just a moment, I will ask Jack for a group of names of 3 people, and that will help cue you that you're in the queue to be able to ask your question. But then we'll be inviting people into this panel space just one at a time, so you can pose your question. And it might be that there might be more than one person who has some information and can weigh in. And then we'll invite the next person in, and so forth in groups of 3. So I think that's the plan for right now. And again, we're going to keep the meeting open until 9 and try to make our way through as many folks as possible. So, and we're going to call on folks in the order that you're raising your hand. So please go ahead and do that now. And again, if you've called in to press *9, and then we'll know that you'd like to speak. So Jack, do we have folks in who've raised their hand so far that you can share with me?
Yeah, we have Diane Foster, Susan Ryan, and Karen Francis.
Great.
And
Okay.
I'll let them in one at a time in that order.
All right. So Diane, if you can bring Diane into the room. And Diane, if you'd like, you can share your video. It looks like you've unmuted yourself. So you're up.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This is an overwhelming amount of information. And my original reason for attending was to express my concern over the tear down of that beautiful building. As we're seeing in my neighborhood with C Homes, so many beautiful old buildings are being torn down. Now, most of those are for-profit ventures, unfortunately. And this obviously is different. And I live around the corner from the Aloha Motel project, the Bellingham Housing Authority, and we're all very excited about that. I can't wait. And so anyway, I'm just, it's wonderful what you're all doing for homelessness. And I donate on a regular basis to the mission and Road to Home and everything else I can donate to. I'm wondering why you couldn't do what one housing place that down in C Home just did on Garden Street and what's the cross street? I can't think, my chemo brain sometimes can't remember names, but anyway, they just added, they took a beautiful old house and they added 2 stories on top of it. And then they built another one beside it with 3 stories that looks exactly like the original building. So you would never know that this was a multifamily housing. I mean, they sell each one separately, but it still looks really nice. And I thought, why couldn't they do that with this building? I was just driving past it the other day and I went, this is such a gorgeous building and I'm glad they'll never tear it down because it's being used. And then I read in the article today in the Herald and went, oh no, they are. So anyway, that was just my main.
Thank you, Diane. So it sounds like you have some questions about the building design and the facade and the look of the space. Ali, are you able to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Moonwater, and thank you, Diane. I think it's a good question. A lot of people in our community have a keen interest in the architectural design of the projects that go on and a lot of our cool historic buildings. And so I definitely understand where you're coming from. I think in this particular case, it's really a matter of scale. The existing building, while it seems very large, its functional space is, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is only about 15,000 square feet. And so, we're talking about going to 75,000, 80,000 square feet, and just to accommodate the programming needs of the mission, it's just such a huge jump that it's not really possible to retrofit that existing building to accommodate that need. It's because it's concrete and it's kind of got a unique interior layout. It's not very efficient for the. I just think functionally it would be nearly impossible to do that. So while I recognize that that doesn't solve the problem of its disappearing, we're hoping that doing something that has a really nice aesthetic. That isn't cutting corners on that aesthetic, the exterior appearance will help. And this will be a long-standing building in the community, so hopefully it will build a kind of a sentiment about it in the future where people say, hey, that's a really cool looking building too, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. But really, to answer your question, why not? It really comes down to scale. There's just no way to accommodate the programming needs with a retrofit.
Thanks, Ollie. And Hans, it looks like you have some input as well.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that. Ali did nail it. This is what we need for our community to receive the effective services it needs. We need more square footage. And it's been a long journey trying to locate an alternative spot. Because like you, I like that building. It's a kind of a quirky looking icon of Old Town. And it's a bummer to have to take it down. I will say there were a lot of people that helped build that back in the early 70s that sacrificed and labored extensively. I want to make sure that they are honored for that and that they see this as just a next step of growth in responding to the need in our community. But it has been a real challenge to find another location. There's been lots of other locations floated for this project. And it's a real challenge in different neighborhoods. Most people, everyone really wants this kind of project because they just see the need and know that the mission's been at this for 100 years and does a good job, but they don't always want it near them. And so it really came down to, okay, no one else will have us. We have to work with what we have and what we currently own. And believe me, we tried. We've really worked hard to try and find other locations. And this one really meets all the needs to help our communities homeless the best and be good neighbors.
Thank you, Hans, and thank you, Diane. And I think up next we have Susan. Susan, you can unmute yourself. There you go. Hi.
Hello. Thank you. Yeah, this clearly an extreme need in the community. And so it's good to see this ambitious project trying to address that. My question, I live at 1000 Astor, which is the building catty corner to Lighthouse Mission. It's between F and G. And there is also a project going in right across the street at Astor and G, which is going to be a 5-story building. The building at 1000 Astor, I think it has like 50 units, some multiple people in the units. So my question is the impact of additional people, additional use on infrastructure, a lot of, new people building in that 3-block, 4-block area. I'm confident that everyone is considering these issues, but I would just like to hear how that is being considered. The new impact of it on the infrastructure and all of a sudden a whole lot more people right in that area.
Thanks, Susan. And Ollie, I'm going to look to you in terms of that impact. Is that something that you'd like to field, or should we send that over to city folks?
I think if Kurt or Anya is comfortable speaking to that cumulative impact component, it's probably something that would be evaluated more by the city than us as a particular project proponent.
Great.
But I keep Kurt, if you're not interested, I could try and talk to it.
Yeah, no, sure. Thank you. Great question, Susan. Yeah, so generally what happens is we do look at all the things that are happening around an area and a building when we have a new project that comes in. So there is a cumulative impact that we do review. Most of these projects are very site specific though, and have very site specific issues or special things about them. So we definitely do look at the impacts. One of the things that we look at is to ensure that we've got adequate utility capacity. So can our water lines and sewer lines and all of those things handle the extra capacity of these developments? And as Ali was going over in the pre-application meeting that we had with staff, that's exactly what we do. So we have people from our public works department, our water and our sewer departments that look specifically to ensure that our existing infrastructure is adequate enough to be able to support these systems. And if they're not, we let the applicant know, and they're actually required to upgrade those systems and put those in place. So they have to be able to have enough capacity to support the use. And then once they put those in, the city maintains them from here on out. So definitely look at cumulative impacts and how these buildings or these projects all affect or utilize our utility systems.
But that other building would be, when the city would look at it, that, oh yeah, there's another building going in there too.
Yeah, exactly. We do. To take a step back, when we adopted the Old Town Urban Village Plan, that's one of the things that we really evaluated and we focused on in this urban village. These areas are designed and supposed to take higher concentrations of people. Okay. So when we adopted that plan, we went through that analysis to make sure, are we allowing enough capacity to incorporate all of this development in this area? So that's kind of what that preliminary Old Town planning process does, kind of establish the framework, make sure that we have that ability and, where these areas and intense development is supposed to be located. And then once we do that, then we get into site specifics to make sure each and every one is able to be built there.
That makes sense. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much, Susan. Thank you, Kurt. And it looks like we have Karen up next.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, we can hear you, Karen. Welcome.
Good. And I have really basic hardware. I don't know if can you hear me well enough that you can understand me okay?
I think so, yes.
All right, great. Thank you for the presentation. Excellent. I'm inspired by the vision and the inspired vision, really. And I also happen to live 4 blocks uphill from the mission. And I'm also retired from a career that was mostly in public health and community nursing. I have followed closely. I worked with the homeless populations and the incarcerated populations and, the tragic revolving door often. And I've followed closely because I have family in central Seattle. So I've followed this past year, especially the developments and the crises with serving the homeless populations in Seattle as well as in Bellingham. I submitted detailed questions and three brief paragraph statement of my concerns, given my background and where I live now. I submitted that ahead of time, so I won't go into details on that. But my question for the purpose of the people here and also for the panel really is in 2 areas. One is for the safety of especially women, children, seniors, the more vulnerable in the surrounding neighborhood. My experience in the year before the pandemic and the closure of the mission was increasingly, I felt increasing fear when I would walk my dog at night, especially. The overflow of people who, from their behavior, indicates to me they were not able or willing to comply with the requirements for shelter at the mission. These were mostly males, many, if not most, displayed mental illness. For every one that I would see when I'd walk, 2-3 blocks just for my last walk at night, I assume there were several more that I didn't, that was sleeping in the bushes or in alcoves or regular bottle throwing in the intersection of DuPont and F. I started to see the return of the violent verbal altercations out on F Street, on DuPont Street. And my concern, from what my read on this is that these are folks that are unwilling or unable to comply with the conditions or whatever guidelines for service at the mission. That's one concern. And as a senior now, and short because my generation gets shorter all the time, I'm really concerned. I question even walking my dog at night, though I don't have a choice. Okay, the other part of my concern is on the community side, both the community of the vulnerable people that the mission serves and the community surrounding and the larger Bellingham community. From what I'm seeing in the developments of bigger cities and providing homeless services for the growing population, what I'm seeing is a decentralizing rather than a centralizing of the services. And on the part of the homeless people that are being served, I think that there is a real high risk when you're serving the complete spectrum of homeless, from women and children to seniors to addicted people with addictions to mentally ill, to the whole spectrum, to have that all in one place. What I'm seeing in the development of services to the unhoused is that this is being centralized and the services are being focused and delivered in decentralized places. I feel like it puts both the community being served and the surrounding neighborhood at risk, fundamental safety risks, with the concentration and then at least doubling the service population that your facility intends. The last level of concern I have is that to concentrate the most vulnerable, the least privileged of our society in one place is not seen as the optimum from what I have followed for decades now in planning. To have communities that include diverse socioeconomic groups is the most healthy for the long-term solutions of these problems. And to concentrate these hundreds, potentially thousands of people who are at the very bottom of a society that is stratified, and to have them concentrated in this out of the way place, to me seems backward. So there's my 3 levels of concern: the immediate safety of the surrounding neighborhood, the safety of the service community, as well as the city community, and the need to integrate the spectrum of people in our larger city.
Thank you for sharing those concerns and summarizing them there as well. Karen, I'm wondering if the Lighthouse Mission staff would like to speak. Bridget, would you like to speak first?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Moonwater. And thank you, Karen, for those concerns. I think that you are probably not alone in some of those questions as well. We've heard some similar questions from others too already. With the first one, I think you bring up a really good point about balancing the needs of the entire population and community that is in Whatcom County and in Bellingham. When we look at vulnerable populations, you are right. There are neighbors that are vulnerable and neighbors that are housed that are vulnerable, and our unhoused neighbors also exhibit vulnerabilities as well. And so both of those groups and the different needs need to be weighed as we are developing a plan for both the facility as well as our programming as well. I do think that when we look at the impact, when you talked about like night walking and people throughout the neighborhood and specifically in the evenings at nights, one of the things that we hope that this facility does is that it decreases some of those number or just capacity barriers for people seeking shelter. And so there have been times in the past when the mission has reached that capacity a lot sooner in the year, right? And we haven't had the beds available for folks to come in. So whether or not they were willing was not as much of an issue as it was just that we didn't have the beds available. And we hope that this facility is able to accommodate more people in that way when there's that need. We also hope that those specialized shelters within this facility will better serve some of those most vulnerable populations that maybe currently are seen out on the street. So maybe a specialized care shelter for people with behavioral health needs. Maybe it would be a respite, a place for people that are medically fragile that otherwise it wouldn't be a good fit within the general population of base camp, but are able to be housed in one of those more specialized shelters. And so I think that some of those folks that are outside are going to be better served and will hopefully not be outside anymore because of these even better service options that will be presented at this facility. So there's that side of it. There's this other side of the public safety side of things where we work really closely with the neighborhood. We have developed a neighborhood advisory group where we currently are on Cornwall Avenue and have worked to mitigate any neighborhood impact with both the city as well as the police department as needed. And we have found that, we have been able to answer questions. We've been able to encourage policy change when needed. We have been able to address specific concerns when they come up as well. And so whether that be extra patrols when that's necessary, all the way to our Joyriders program going out throughout the surrounding vicinity of the facility so that we can do outreach with people. Our hope is that we can reach out, invite in. We believe that the hardest client to work with is, of course, the client we never see and the client that never enters our doors. And so our hope in heading out into the neighborhood is that those folks that you may be seeing on the streets are people that do become clients eventually, that do choose to come inside. So there's that side of things. Your second question about decentralizing and centralizing services, I think that is a really good one. I think I would refer back to as well Tara's picture of the city as a whole and the current housing projects that are being developed throughout the entire city that serve our vulnerable or low income neighbors. And it's a reminder that, that they were pretty spread out throughout those neighborhoods. I won't be able to list off all the neighborhoods that they were in, but it was a pretty wide range of neighbors as well. I also think that one of the things when we see in larger cities, the centralization of services, we see multiple different shelters, even on one street in larger cities. We see, for instance, down in Seattle, if you can't go in one shelter for the night, you walk down a block and you head to a different shelter. And so it creates more of a congregating place for people seeking services when there's all of those services back to back there. In Bellingham, we don't have those sorts of options for people. We don't have if you can't come to base camp, you can head down to the other shelter down the street tonight. And if you can't go to that one, there's this other option. And there's just not that sort of centralization. On the flip side, though, one of the things that is a best practice is to make services most accessible to people. And Karen, if you've been in the field, you probably are well aware of this as well. It's just, we want to break down as many barriers as possible as we are serving people. And so if that means then providing a medical clinic like CMAR does at our current basic camp location, and hopefully would be able to do at our future one as well, providing medical services on site to people, providing mental health services on site to people so that they don't even have to have that extra barrier of figuring out transportation when they're in survival mode, or figuring out and keeping track of all of those different appointments. And when you're really worried about where your next meal is going to come from, or if you're going to have a place to stay the night. And so the hope is that as we provide those services in that central location, is that people can actually get connected a lot sooner. They can stay connected and maintain those connections to those services, and hopefully stabilize sooner than they would otherwise, than if those services were even all throughout, right? And so for our guests, our hope is that actually moves people along quicker and into housing a lot sooner than it would otherwise. And so that centralization of those sorts of services, our hope is that benefits our guests greatly. We have found, and we've heard from some mental health counselors in the community, that typically it takes them about 30 days to establish rapport with somebody and to set up appointments and to create that therapeutic relationship. With folks at base camp, they have found it takes about 5 days. And the reality is that they have cited the fact that people feel safe there. People know that they are cared for there, and then they also trust the staff. And when staff refer them to this counselor, that trust is transferred there as well. Your last question about concentrating the most vulnerable and least privileged in one place, and the need for diverse groups of people, for community health to be kind of rubbing shoulders with each other. I won't answer that one fully, but I do. Our hope too is that this base camp facility is a place where our neighbors are coming as well to rub shoulders, that our housed neighbors and our unhoused neighbors, as we talk about those entrepreneurial spaces that would be primarily for our guests developing job skills, we hope it's a place that our housed neighbors are coming as well. And that if we're serving food, maybe they're coming and buying food from that restaurant. We hope that people are coming in and doing volunteer work. We hope that our guests and our clients as well are able to be embedded in a community that is hospitable towards them, and they to the neighbors that are housed as well. Many of our clients really enjoy being a part of the Bellingham community, and they find that it is home for them just as much as it is home for people that are housed. And so as we talk about that rubbing of shoulders, I think our hope is that it goes the both ways, that there is a rubbing of shoulders there too in Old Town. Ollie or Moonwater, I'm not sure if anybody else wants to add on to anything, but I will send it your way.
Can I just say one thing I did forget? A priority would be to deal with the people who, from what I could see, and the couple I talked to, would go to the mission services for food and for the drop-in, but had no intention of sleeping there at night. Had no intention whatever. They preferred their lifestyle out in the neighborhood park or in the alcove or between buildings or wherever. And the fact that the mission was giving these services without any required participation in programs attracted people for the meals and maybe for the daytime socializing. So what will you do? And this isn't answering you now, it's just a question I would like you all to give some attention to. How will you deal with the overflow of the people who want the basic services without intentions of getting involved in the mission's recovery and rehab? You don't have to answer that. I know I've taken too much time, but I did want to say that's a specific request.
Well,
No, Ollie, I could answer it real quick if you think that there's time.
Well, Moonwater, if you're comfortable with that. And I also want to just say that Karen, because Karen is a close by resident, that I think Karen, there's probably opportunity for you to do follow-up directly on this too, because one of the things that Bridget mentioned was kind of that community outreach component. And it sounds like that's going to really kick off as we move into the next phase. And so if you don't feel like you get, full answers or thorough answers to some of these questions regarding like the spillover impacts, there's probably opportunity to have a more lengthy dialogue on that, just so you know. This isn't kind of the end of the road for that conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Ollie. And thank you, Karen, for that. That's actually what I was going to bring up, is that one of the things that we did with our neighbors on Cornwall Avenue was that we developed a who to call when list, and kind of a, what is it called? Not a spreadsheet. It's a
Phone tree.
Phone tree, kind of like a phone tree.
It's an incident matrix.
Flow chart. Incident matrix. Sorry, I think the baby is stealing my words. So the incident matrix, where depending on what situation you are encountering, it would then indicate like who to call as well. So as we go further into those conversations, know that that's something that we would want to continue to develop for this neighborhood as well, and give and equip everyone with those tools too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. And Karen, one last thing. I did, just so you know, I did forward your email to Lighthouse mission staff and to the city, so that they did have an opportunity to see like the more detailed comments and concerns that you expressed. And so there's already kind of an initial connection there, so that Bridget and the rest of the staff can reflect back on, some of the detail you provided in that email you sent, which was a very detailed and thoughtful email.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Bridget and Ollie. Jack, who do we have next in the queue?
I'm gonna say the name wrong, but Lavera Langman is next, and that's all we have right now with raised hands.
Okay, so we may not have your name correct, but if it's Lavera or Lavera, if you can join us and correct us and pose your question. Welcome.
Sorry, I had to figure it out.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm just questioning, I agree with Karen that this is too big for our neighborhood. And I'm wondering why, with the property value down there so great, with the view of the water, down the whole building anyway, why wouldn't you move it to a more appropriate location where it's not affecting our town, our old town, our waterfront? Because for me, as a woman, I live singly in this neighborhood. I am harassed probably once a month from people coming from Cornwall Park to the Mission. And I just think the taxes I'm paying keep going up and my safety feels like it's going down. And I feel like you're really adding even more to this. And I hear a lot of I hope. But when you put this many people in one area, any kind of people, it becomes a problem, even if it was all teenagers. And in Europe, when some of the most successful things are when they start in neighborhoods and they have small groups of people that live in different neighborhoods that we can all know and start to learn about and care about and understand them as humans. It's way better than putting a giant group together. And that's how I feel. So.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Lavera, and expressing those concerns. And I hear that some of the similarity with some of the concerns that were expressed a moment ago. And so I just want to look to the Lighthouse Mission staff first to see if any of you would like to weigh in and have a conversation with Lavera about what she's expressed. Bridget?
Sure, I can start. And then I think it would be great if Hans could address the why this location, maybe again. So Lavera, thank you for your concern. And I realize that that is the very real thing for people. And I want to encourage you as well that I don't know what sort of action thus has been taken or if there is anything, but I want this community to be very safe as well. And so if there is harassment happening, I would encourage anyone, whether listening here on our panel or elsewhere, to report that too, because that is not something that we want in any of our neighborhoods. We want everyone to be safe as well. We have in the past at the Mission, when we have neighbors call us and let us know that there was harassment happening, they think it was one of our guests and they may not be sure. We are often able to address that with those individuals. We do ask in our code of conduct that people respect our neighbors and respect the community that they live in. And so that is something that we want to have those conversations with people about. And so I would encourage that continued that calling. And I realize that is work and all of that. And we want to be a part of that solution. And for that person, for them to have that restoration that can happen and that transformation and that growth in their own life too. Yeah, I think as well with that, our staff too are often like, they know people really well. They have those relationships built. And so yes, they walk the streets and they probably feel really comfortable. They know some people by name and they have crisis prevention and intervention training and de-escalation skills and all of that. But they also want to help equip our neighbors as well with some of those safety things. And so there have been times when they have walked with people through some of those things. They've addressed those with our clients. And then they've also reached out to our neighboring agencies like BPD or otherwise to talk about some safety ideas as well.
What is your staff to client ratio?
Yeah, so at our current facility, during the day shifts from about 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., we have around 5 staff on at any given time, plus volunteers, as well as interns. And so that 5 staff is not including volunteers or interns that are on. And then we also often have other agencies working out of base camp. And so right now we have a community paramedic that is there think 7 days a week from 12 to 9 p.m. each day, and other agencies that are there each day meeting with clients and whatnot. On the overnight shift, we have about 2 staff on currently, and most people are asleep, so there's not too much happening during that time, but they do rounds around the facility and address concerns as they can with our neighbors then as well. There's something else I was going to mention there. Anyways,
how many do you have sleeping there with 2 people watching that many people? How many are sleeping there every night?
Yeah, so right now we have around 150.
That's not enough staff at all.
Oh my God.
That's just scary. I mean, you really need people.
Yeah, and we have heard that from others, that there's that concern. And I think that it is both our staff's training, our program structure, as well as the boundaries and code of conduct that are in place that keeps it safe. And our clients really do want the facility to be safe.
You know, I work in a program where I deal with high-risk people, and you cannot, that is way outnumbered. That is absolutely not even close to what the numbers you need to have with that.
If I could piggyback
Go for it.
One of the, with a new facility like this, with additional programs and shelters within the shelter, a number of those shelters within the shelter are going to have their own staff operating. And so there will be an increase in staffing, and it'll likely be around a 50% increase over what we have currently. And so we are wanting to be good with that. And we also want to be good stewards of the donor dollars we receive. We are privately funded as an institution. We want to make sure that we are getting the best bang for our buck and able to pay the staff a good competitive rate for the marketplace and make sure we can do what we can do. I also know that, man, would it be nice if we could have a 1-to-1 ratio? Could you imagine the impact that would have? But the reality is too, we just can't. It's just not a feasible thing financially to be able to do that. One other thing though, to speak to the proximity issue, I should say to speak to the issue of why here in this particular neighborhood. I mean, the mission's been operating in this neighborhood for the last 98 years, and we own the land, which is a big thing. It was really hard to find other places to be able to operate like we do. But one of the key things is we have to be able to reach our customer. We got to be in proximity. They have to be able to walk there. Because we thought about Iron Gate or thought out by the airport or these different locations that would seem to have maybe less impact on a neighborhood, more industrial type areas. But we realized that the people wouldn't be able to reach there. And so we decided we have to be within walking distance of downtown. And that's why we ended up going with or deciding that this location was the best location.
But why do you think that doesn't make sense that they can walk there? Because where are they coming from? They're coming from Cornwall Park. They're coming from different places where they're sleeping by the river. So when you say they have to walk there, that doesn't make sense, because if they do need to get around, they can be given vouchers on the bus. But to walk, what's happening is they are walking, and they're walking and sitting in Bellingham with their big carts and everything, and harassing people downtown and in the elevator of the parkade and things. And your property is worth so much money on the water, and you know that. So you could easily sell that and get a much bigger plot of land someplace else where it would not affect all our local parks and our local, and if we are helping people and we are getting them into the buildings, it doesn't really matter where the mission is, because our goal is to get them permanent housing and in good mental health. So that argument doesn't stand up to me anyway. So I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, so I'll let you go to the other person.
Hans, I'll just take a moment. Just to interject, and Lavera, I just hear that the safety concerns that you're feeling now and that you've experienced that are very real today. And then the concern that you have about what the future might look like as this project grows. What does that mean for safety for you in the future as well? And so, Hans, if there's more information that you have or that you can speak to, to address that safety concern. I would imagine that's it's a shared concern. It's come up with some other folks who've spoken tonight as well.
I think when you're doing this building, you need to actually also put how much staffing you're going to put with each different area, and how there should be security around the outer areas, because that's the only way these neighborhoods have to walk to the water. And so unless we're going to put bridge over Broadway, which I'm totally for, we need to have a pathway that women and children can walk down there. You need security in the front. You need to come up with plans to also show us we will be safe.
Yeah, I like the sentiment here. I think, I know one of our team, Justin Reeves, is on the panel too. He's trained in CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. And that idea is how you arrange rooms inside and exteriors and plants and all these things really matter. And how do you keep people as safe as possible? Which is why we want to put the entrance to the program as well, so it doesn't cause basically traffic jams on the corner of F and Holly. The access will be off Astor Street towards the back of the building, the main access. The families will have a separate access off of Holly Street. And some groups, appear scarier than others. The folks that are more low barrier, for example, can appear more scary sometimes. They look rough and you don't know their story necessarily. And so I will say though, the other programs that we have in the neighborhood, like our Agape Home for Women or single moms with kids, or the future programs that we're going to have for seniors and things like that, those programs have very little impact on the neighborhood. Those folks are not you don't see some of the more challenging street behavior that you can sometimes see in an area. And for us, it's really important that we be good neighbors and that the community feels safe. Absolutely. And so I love hearing ideas, and that's part of what this is to really good feedback of concerns for a neighborhood, so we can really have a robust solution to it. So thank you for that. And I think this conversation is going to keep going for sure. So please do reach out. I'd love to have you down for a tour to see how we do things and ask questions.
Thank you so much, Hans. And thank you, Lavera. And it looks like we have some other folks with their hands raised. It sounds like there's an invitation to continue that conversation as well. So thank you, Lavera. Jack, who do we have up next?
Yeah, so we have 6 raised hands now, and we're going to have Chris Hamilton, then Lynn Jackson, and then Rebecca Malloy.
Okay, thank you. So Chris, can you join us? If you can unmute yourself, I think we have you. There we go.
Okay, how do I get my picture up there?
Let's see, if you have a video icon, it might be in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. You can click.
Oh, start video, there we go.
Okay.
Yes, actually, I'm Jean. I'm just under Chris's.
Okay, welcome, Jean.
Ali probably knows who Chris is, but I wanted to wait until the more crucial questions were being asked, because this is just a design question. I want to start by saying I first heard about your new building from Lauren when he gave me a tour of Base Camp, and since then I've been looking for ways that I could introduce the idea to my neighborhood association and to people in the community, because I'm very excited about it. I just have one kind of silly design question. The canopy sort of thing that you have up there with the cross cut out of it, and it's quite lovely. I'm trying to figure out what it could be made out of so that somebody with a box cutter isn't going to be able to. I assume that you've thought what material that's made out of, because it sounds to me like a question that people might ask, and I want to be able to answer them. Yeah, that thing.
I could answer that one.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was actually looking through the finishes from the architect today, and it looks like stamped steel. So it should be pretty robust.
Okay.
We're trying to build everything on this building to be really robust, to kind of take,
Yes.
we're thinking airport design,
Yes.
heavy traffic. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
That's all I had. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean. And I think we have Lynn up next.
There we go. Hi. I wanted to thank Karen and Lavera for sharing their concerns, because I do have the same concerns preliminary around safety. So I've been living here in the Crofton F Street for several years, and I have seen that the safety issues have increased. I don't feel safe out there anymore, except for during the middle of the day. I won't go towards the Mission. I don't walk to the waterfront anymore. If I have to go down there, I'll drive, because I feel unsafe. And also, because of the overflow with the encampments down towards Maritime Heritage Park, I don't use that lovely park anymore either. So I do have some severe concerns over the safety of having additional people that will be housed at the Mission, and that daytime overflow and potentially nighttime overflow, and what that's going to do for our neighborhood. And as well as, and Lavera said it, our property taxes keep going up, but I feel like this is going to devalue our homes. So these are just concerns that I wanted to voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those concerns and affirming the safety issues that you've experienced as well, Lynn. I'm not sure if the folks here tonight have additional information to speak to more to the safety issue beyond what they've shared at this point. I did hear you also acknowledging a concern about property values, and I'm wondering if someone from the city or Ollie would be able to speak to that piece in particular.
I want to just speak to the piece about the Old Town District. Something that I didn't mention earlier is that Old Town's envisioned as an urban village. I think Kurt mentioned this. And one of the things that's challenging in this neighborhood is there aren't very many other people like right in Old Town living in Old Town. And that's gonna change. The Parberry family, and they're the ones that own the real estate between the Mission campus and downtown. They own about 7 city blocks. They've put their real estate on the market, and there are interested purchasers. And so we are going to see a change in this part of our city. And I think that one of the things that we strive to achieve as planners is look to provide a real mix of demographic. And so while I recognize the concern about concentration, what we're trying to do is bring in a lot of other people to live in this neighborhood as well, business owners, employees. I think when there aren't other people there, and right now we don't have Northwest Recycling operating either. So it feels even a little bit emptier, and that should be changing, and we should be seeing some development in this neighborhood kind of on pace with what the Lighthouse mission is achieving. And I just want to throw that out there. Thank you, Moonwater.
Thank you, Tara. I realize that the Parberries have, sold their, or want to sell their land, and that there will be infill, but I think that there's a difference in the between people who are homed and people who are homeless, and it's that that dichotomy there of those two kind of butting heads. And again, it comes down to, for me, mostly safety. And I haven't seen, especially prior to the pandemic, where the city or the Lighthouse mission did any outreach to the direct neighborhood to help us with this. You know, I didn't know who to go to other than to, you know, call 911 if something was, you know, really bad that was going on.
Yeah, Richard, thank you for that, Lynn. I was going to mention some of the contrasting elements from our previous base camp at the drop-in center at 1013 West Holly Street and the way that we're currently operating on Cornwall Avenue and plan to operate at the new facility at 910 West Holly as well. Many of our neighbors remember and can recall us being at the 1013 West Holly Street address, where there was the lineup outside on the sidewalk and people kind of spilling out onto the sidewalk. And there was the lack of space and the lack of outdoor space and people out there smoking throughout the day and hanging out right there. And it kind of being that main way that people were traveling and walking from the neighborhood down to the waterfront as well. And sometimes the sidewalk would be just full of people, and which was tough on both ends of things for our neighbors, but then also for our people that were experiencing homelessness as well, as they were standing on the sidewalk too. It wasn't comfortable for them either. And at our current location on Cornwall Avenue, one of the things that we have done there, along with our partners with the city and the county, is that there's this huge outdoor courtyard space for people to congregate. That's where we do check-in now. People aren't lining up on a sidewalk. They're not spilling out into that neighboring spaces and vicinity. And we definitely have found that we want to continue that at the new facility as well. And so the places where people will line up will be inside. We will have outdoor like deck space. There will be outdoor areas within the building. It won't be just on the sidewalk. We're asking people to not loiter on the sidewalk. We will be doing rounds around the facility to help move people along from those areas so that and inviting them into services as well. And so I just want to bring up that contrast where currently at the Cornwall facility, we've seen a great improvement in that respect. And we plan to continue that moving to this facility with all of that experience we have now at the Cornwall site as well as at Bellingham High School.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Bridget.
Moonwater, can I just add one more thing to address Lynn and some of the other concerns about safety? We've heard Lynn, you and a few other folks express this concern. One thing I want to reiterate about the process that we're going to engage in, which is a little different, is that in 2020, the city adopted this interim housing ordinance. And prior to that, we really didn't have a governing ordinance for legally permitting this type of facility. And so what the city did is they included a number of requirements in that code that the applicant or the proponent for a project like this has to address when they apply for a permit. And so when we come in with our permit, there'll be a number of things that have to be addressed. Some of the things Bridget just referred to about intake policies, but also one of the key requirements is an operations plan. And that operations plan has got 5 or 6 bullet points in the code that have to be addressed. They include things like key staff roles and responsibilities, site and facility management, including a security and emergency plan, site and facility maintenance plans, and also outreach with surrounding property owners and residents, and an ongoing good neighbor policy. And so what the city's going to force or obligate the Lighthouse mission to do as a part of this application is lay out in clear terms what their plan is for all of those things. And then there'll be an opportunity for members of the public like yourself, once the full application's made, to review that plan in much greater detail, and then comment specifically to that plan if you feel, or any of the folks who've expressed concern about safety feel that that plan's inadequate or is lacking some component, and then the city will have a chance to evaluate that. So I'm not saying that that's going to solve everybody's concerns, but I want you to be aware that when the application comes in, there'll be a great deal of detail provided on how things will actually work. And then the public will have an opportunity to comment on that and express, reservations about certain components or suggestions and so forth. So be aware of that. And when the notice does go out, those of you who are concerned about safety, please be sure to review that component of the application very clearly, in great detail, because that might be a good point to kind of express more specific concerns that you see aren't necessarily being, or you feel aren't necessarily being addressed.
Thank you, Ollie. Yeah, it's just that I feel that the Lighthouse mission has like an uphill battle to go with making some of us feel that this can be a safe environment for the residents and for the people who are staying at the Lighthouse mission. Because I see, people walking out in the middle of F Street, and I worry sometimes they'll be hit by cars.
Thank you so much for coming tonight, Lynn, and sharing those concerns. Appreciate it. We have a few other folks who've raised their hand, and it looks like we have Rebecca up next. So in on that conversation there. Rebecca, are you able to join us? If you can unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
I think you are now, yes. Welcome. Okay. And if you want to share your video.
No, I don't have a video to share.
Okay, that's all right. We can hear you.
But okay, I guess you don't need to look at me. I have 5 different points here. One is that with the new, the selling of Carberry's lands and the city planning that Old Town is a urban village, we will be seeing increased high-rise structures like we have seen around the city, 5 stories and maybe even taller, which we have seen a lot in Seattle, which in my opinion, I hate going to Seattle anymore because it's too dense with population and cars, and it's just crazy making going to Seattle anymore with all the increased development of high rises. So I think this location for the mission will be too tight of a location to bring in such an increased population that have special needs. I'm very concerned about the increased employee parking. I think you are greatly understaffed, and I do not think that parking has been adequately considered. And I think the city seriously needs to review that. Number 2, who are your partners in building this structure? And number 3, how much money is being given to Lighthouse Mission from the specific partners? And 4, how much county and city COVID money and funding is being given to the Lighthouse Mission? And how much money from all the assorted programs, government programs, are being given to the Lighthouse Mission to build this facility that I think is inadequate for parking and will bring in too much activity to our, when we think of an urban village, I don't think we think of housing all of our homeless and all of their problems in one little city block.
Thank you, Rebecca. It sounds like with the questions that you have, there might be a couple folks who can weigh in. So I heard some questions around density and parking. And then I also heard some questions about the funding and who is contributing to this project, where that money is coming from. So parking, I think, is a question that some city staff might be able to weigh in on. And then I'm wondering if Lighthouse staff might be able to weigh in on the funding contributors.
Sure, I'll take a stab at the parking, and I might ask Tara to chime in a little bit on this as well. A part of our review does include parking standards, so we do specifically include that in the new standards. We need to make sure that adequate parking is provided. I think that one of the things that we've seen with these types of facilities is that you don't see the typical types of parking rates that you would with a standard residential structure. Many of these folks, has been noted tonight, walk to these facilities, do not own cars either. So there is a portion of the review that does look at parking. And then I think one of the other questions, Rebecca, and thank you for those questions tonight, and your points, was about the increase and the high-rise structures and the increase of density here. And, you know, I turn back to our comprehensive plan and our long-term future and how the city is intending to accommodate growth. And these urban village centers are one of the main ways that we're doing that. And the urban villages are designed to incorporate very high density levels of people. So these are the areas that we've said we need to have a lot of people in these places. So I don't know if Tara wants to add a little bit more on to the Old Town planning process that took place and kind of our visions of this area. I know she's mentioned it a little bit tonight, but if she wants to add on to that. If not, we could turn it over to the mission staff.
Actually, I was going to comment on the partners, and Hans can speak to all of the partners because I don't know who they all are. But in the city's role, because I think Rebecca was getting at that part about the city and the county role, because you mentioned COVID funding. We are planning on using we are using CARES Act dollars and other dollars that were specifically authorized by the federal government to respond to COVID, specifically for homeless population that came to the county for the base camp facility that's on Cornwall. But in this location, we haven't figured out what sources. We don't even have an actual deal with the mission yet. But we're looking at investing in the infrastructure around it. Predominantly, there's improvements on Astor that need to be made, and then sidewalk improvements on F and Holly, as those streets are in pretty good shape. So I don't have a cost estimate yet. We're planning it with kind of a larger infrastructure package. We will be seeking grant opportunities and city resources and I'm not aware of any COVID dollars at this point in time that we're looking into for the Old Town infrastructure improvements.
Okay.
And I can piggyback on that as well. Yes, the county and the city with CARES dollars or COVID dollars is very helpful for base camp and the tenant improvements, and we sublet. So it's considered an in-kind gift to the mission to be able to operate in that location. That's been a huge support. So big thank you to the city and county for helping make that happen. In terms of who is funding this particular project in Old Town, this is purely private funding. We do pursue grants, but they're not government grants. We're working with individuals that really appreciate the vision for what's happening here and want to see more of this life transformation model employed in our community to really move the needle on homelessness. And so, yeah, it's in terms of the partners, we work with a lot of other agencies, but not for the funding of a building. And because we're a Christian organization, government isn't allowed to fund those types of things. And we would agree that that's not a good thing. So we don't pursue government money that way.
Thank you. Can you still hear me?
We can.
Yeah. I just would like to thank you for this very informative presentation this evening by all participants there who've coordinated it. And I also want to thank the 75 to 100 Bellingham citizens who are listening and hoping that they will continue to keep up on the progress of the project and participate and write letters and send emails to the city regarding your concerns so that the hearing examiner can review all of our very important ideas and visions. I had one woman today I read, she said, well, why is the building, does it look so drab? Why can't there be some color? So, you know, just odd things. I mean, I process a million pieces of details, and I'm trying to share a little bit tonight. Thank you.
It looks like we might have frozen Moonwater. Can everyone else hear me okay? I'll just step in and Rebecca, thank you for that. I would echo that completely, that we definitely appreciate all the participation and encourage continued participation. I listed out some of those other opportunities, and we want to make sure that people take advantage of those and contribute to the discussion, and not just about, you know, the programming, but also about design. Oftentimes design gets lost in the mix on a project like this because there's other issues that generate more interest. And so, you know, don't hesitate to participate in that design conversation as well as the project proceeds. So it looks like we've got Moonwater back. So we'll wait a moment. And then I think, Moonwater, are you back in?
I'm back in on my cell phone. What can I apologize for? I have no idea what just happened. I'm so sorry about that. So I'm back on my phone. So I'm not sure what I missed. Are we ready for some more speakers, or am I interrupting someone's
Nope.
question?
I just chatted for a bit and thanked Rebecca for her comments and questions. And then I think Jack does have a few more people. And if you end up having difficulty with the tech component, just let me know. And if you need to step aside to resolve that, I could step in for a moment if need be. But Jack, you've got a few more folks lined up, right?
Recording in progress.
Is that
Moonwater, you're gonna need to mute.
Can I just say, I am so sorry, everyone. This is the moderator facilitator's worst nightmare, that it's my technology that just causes the interruption. So we're back on track. I'm back in the meeting.
no
Jack, who do we have in the queue right now?
We have Gordon Durham, then Luke Haran, and then Brian Russell.
Okay, thank you. Gordon, can you join us?
And I'm seeing Rebecca's raising her hand again. Rebecca, I'm not sure. Okay, just drop back down. If you have a quick question, you could throw it in the Q&A, especially if it's technological, but otherwise, we'll wait to have you come back till others have spoken.
Thanks, Jack. Welcome, Gordon. You're up.
Everybody. First, I'm Gordon Durham with Cornwall Park Neighborhood Association. Would like to start by just acknowledging Jack Bloss and the Lighthouse mission folks for extending an invitation to the neighborhood here, kind of exceeding the traditional neighborhood or 500-foot boundary. I think it's nice to see you guys actively reaching out to kind of expand the feedback and community stakeholder to share. So nice job on that. On behalf kind of the neighborhood, just kind of chatting, we were able to share it on Nextdoor and kind of some flyers as you have seen. But a couple of questions I had, kind of operational and then design. On the, I think Lavera and Lynn and Karen all shared, that was kind of the largest, most significant concern I heard from neighborhood folks related to safety and, with some of the more specific objective issues with kind of intimidation and, with some violence and some things down with the tech school fisheries program and some sexual assault and intimidation, number of things that have kind of taken place. I think it's important to note that these are not obviously likely all occupants of your facility, but many of the services that you offer, so fortunate to our neighborhood and community, I think is a natural draw. So I think a specific request, when I asked, well, what would you like to see to address some of the safety if we do expand and help, meet some of this growing need in our community with homeless support. And it came down to, hired off-duty police, hired security, dedicated security staff. And I think it was mentioned by maybe Lynn, I think, or somebody else tonight is, in your safety operations plan as a part of your conditional use and whatnot is to really earmark funding, dedicated staffing with clearly defined roles and responsibility, not only on the, the property itself, but just really encourage you guys to consider, like your outreach team, the little cart. I've not seen them, but look like a little electric cart. Great idea. I think it'd be nice to have that presence, obviously, with some soft skills. You don't want to create another barrier where you're intimidating visitors and folks from visiting your facility, obviously, but, working with, I heard SEPTED, we got the hot team, we got folks around, but I think it'd be really important to have that a part of your operations plan, specifically in the safety and with dedicated staff, I think would alleviate some of that. I think it's exciting to hear some of the successes you've had on Cornwall, reaching out with the neighborhood, kind of lessons learned with, confining and offering outdoor space so it's not so visible, it's not impacting ingress, egress along the public byway, reduces those, we'll say, opportunities for maybe the folks to, make people feel uncomfortable. So hopefully, and it's exciting to hear, hopefully we can see that leveraged with some of the outdoor covered space. Question I had is on the covered areas with some of the laws, are folks going to be able to smoke in those outdoor second, third floor covered areas? Because I think that's, in my experience, just as an observer and community member, is that's what often draws folks out, right? They're going out to smoke and that creates the congregation. And then obviously they're not as a part of your resources. It expands kind of the impact of the areas you have to observe. So it'd be good to know what your plans are for offering those areas that I think are a success for some of the Cornwall location. On parking, it did come up. I heard there was a mention from Ollie in his presentation that there was discussions around off-site parking. I think it'd be important to know what the plan is. If there's a parking lot you guys are going to designate, is that a non-conforming request with the urban village? I don't know that we're allowed to have just a full dedicated parking in the urban village area. So is the city prepared to look and coordinate with some of that stuff? And then really thinking about, I think to hear Hans, who's been great. He's come to our neighborhood association, spoke, just really inspired. He made me a big supporter of what you guys do down there, just in his one meeting with me. I think it'd be important, his story about, when the family comes to town in the minivan at midnight, where are they going to park? Much less if they show up in an RV. You don't have to walk but a couple blocks around Lighthouse Mission now, and you see a number of operational or unoperational RVs. And so if we are offering offsite parking, hopefully it's adjacent, close, and not a non-conforming big permitting process to be able to happen, especially as you grow. And will it accommodate some of those RVs, larger vehicles? And then I'd like to also, last thing is, when you're appraising the parking requirements for this facility, I think I agree with Kurt. It's very unique, right? You don't see the traditional residential, one spot for every one bedroom, or bed. But if you're looking at a 600 potentially bed operation, a lot of folks do have vehicles. They're coming to get resources because it's too cold to live in their vehicles, and that's probably no more than a few months a year. But what is the plan? What are the thoughts around with the city in those discussions of what you're going to require for that parking, and how is it going to be accommodated in the offsite location that Ollie mentioned? Again, thank you for everything. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks to Moonwater for making it work. I kept my video off. I was like, uh-oh, my bandwidth is tripping out too, so I don't want to be the other person. So nice job tonight, everyone. Thanks for all the information. Thanks for what you do for the community, and just important to know that there was a lot of really excited folks in our neighborhood. It's definitely a need. People admire what you're doing down there. Just want to make sure that we're really thinking and having a real intense dialogue with some real action items of some of the concerns brought forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm going to look, Ollie, do you want to weigh in or help me direct that question as well?
I think that Justin, who handles operations, can speak to maybe smoking and parking components. I think the concerns about safety are well heard from earlier. Before you start, Justin, though, I just want to let Gordon know that while you were speaking, I did have an opportunity to look at the Old Town overlay, and standalone parking facilities are an outright permitted use. So there shouldn't be any issues with nonconformity or conditional use associated with that. However, I do agree that proximity is important. So I want to let Justin talk about how that might play out and answer your question about that and smoking.
Yeah, so for parking, we actually had a lot of questions about that ourselves, because we want to make sure that our guests and our staff and our volunteers all have a place to park without walking a significant distance. And so back in January, we actually just went out and counted vehicles during our parking lot's busiest times. We did this for a full week, and then we collected all that data, averaged everything out. And what we came to is that we would have a need for 24 stalls to accommodate this new site. But fortunately, we do have a significant number of buildings in the area, and a significant amount of parking. If you drive through Old Town right now, in the current mission site, you'll see that there's a lot of empty parking currently. And so we plan to use all those stalls that we currently have. And then Jack, if you wanted to show that campus map, that'd be great. So with that need of 24, we figured out we would only actually need 6 stalls off site. And the surrounding area currently has about 20 street stalls if you just measure up 1 block radius around 910 West Holly. And so those 6 stalls, from a SEPTED perspective, we feel like that'll be a benefit to the community to have a couple of our staff or volunteers parking in those areas, because that just adds eyes on the street. That's kind of a common SEPTED principle. If you have our staff patrolling, basically, as they're be engaging with people who are in the 1 block perimeter there. And so we want to encourage that kind of interaction around the mission. And as for the smoking, that deck, Jack, if you want to show the floor plan that shows the deck there, we actually measured that deck out with the architect to plan out for a section of it to be 25 feet away from the building entrance to accommodate the smoking rules. So it is large enough that if people are away from those doors, they will be able to smoke while on our deck area. So we can tell people, hey, don't smoke out on Astor Street, come over on the covered deck.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
If I could piggyback real quick too, if that's okay. One of the questions as well was, making sure there's good security around, and just to kind of give a philosophy of how we do the work we do, the mission staff have to be considered advocates for the people on the street. And when folks are on the street, this isn't the case with everybody, but for a number of the folks that are in chronic homelessness, there's a real distrust of institutions, distrust of the police, distrust of the hospital, that kind of thing. And so, though we work very closely to ensure justice is done with the authorities, we also really have to be the advocate in these situations in order to have the trust for someone to be willing to take next steps. So we're real careful about how we engage folks that way. But if it is a real criminal activity that's occurring, we do encourage you to contact the police or contact us and we'll talk you through it. But we want to make sure that mission staff are always perceived as advocates.
Thank you. Understood. Again, I think it'd be really important to offer to the community as a solution, knowing that it's such a significant issue, and it doesn't have to be the traditional ideal of police force or security, but more of that support, coach, monitor, SEPTED. A lot of those would be really important. I think to close out, and I'll let you go. The parking, I think, to not unintentionally impact potential future development. Developers looking to come to the area, parking is going to be tight. If we kind of give away too much parking, and then we have folks parking along the street in RVs, other vehicles, parking surveys, parking counts are not going to look ideal for future developers. So just being really aware of that long-term impact as we hope to see additional development coming down there. Thanks again for everything.
Thank you so much, Gordon. We appreciate you being here tonight. And I believe we do have a couple more hands up, and I think we have Luke is next in the queue. Luke, if you can join us. And if you're able to unmute yourself, and if you would like to share or able to share your video.
Sure. This actually isn't Luke. I'm just using his phone or his device. My question is, I don't know if you could see in the chat, it's not really a question of safety. I appreciate everyone asking about that and sharing those concerns, because it's not, there's not the if, it is. I can go on a jog or a walk any day and be okay in, through Maritime Park one day and then not okay another day, and really worried in the middle of the day. And it's not that I absolutely do not want to be compassionate towards individuals. I understand that it's not always in their control if it's a mental health issue or a substance issue, but bullet points on a safety plan don't do a lot for me as I'm an individual out there on my own. And on top of that, just in our neighborhood, we have so many children and so many elderly folks. And I can't tell you how many times we have called with to the police, not to criminalize anything, but because I'm not equipped and I think someone needs support. And so I always preface my conversation with the police department to say, this is about a wellness check, not about someone necessarily doing something wrong. But it feels like I want to be compassionate, particularly to so many of those families that you're talking about moving here and not having somewhere to live in their van and park at night. I can't imagine being in that situation. It breaks my heart. But at the same time, I really worry about individuals who just aren't in the right set of mind, ending up in someone's yard with a small child, ending up in, with me or any other individual who's out in the community on any given day. And it feels like a little bit of an invitation with all of this work that we're going to end up with more risk. We're actually could be potentially increasing the risk rather than, hopefully. I don't know. I don't have a solution. I don't think anyone does. I also work in a space where we have a lot of social services and mental health support, particularly for youth. But like as the woman was asking about, this is really prime property in our city, and it is in residential neighborhoods that we're out, we're an active community, as active as they come. And I just want to make sure that we can still be active and feel safe.
Thank you for that. Bridget?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I didn't catch your name, but
oh, sorry, I'm Allie.
Allie, thank you for that. And I think that one of the things in my mind, as I look at a facility like this, and I'm thinking about as I run and walk throughout Bellingham as well and encounter people on trails and throughout the area, one of the things that gets me excited about a facility like this is that hopefully there are more specialized spaces for those individuals that are out there on trails and in RVs and parked throughout the community that are not currently accessing services because there's not a service necessarily specific or set up for their needs. And so I think that you bring up a really good point. There are people that are currently not in services right now. And one of our hopes is that they would be in services. And so that they would not still be out on the trails, and that this would be a help and address some of that concern, not necessarily exasperate it or increase that concern. And so what we found statistically too, and studies have shown that people will move for a house or an apartment, but they won't move for a shelter bed. And so this idea too of it necessarily like attracting people to the area, what we have seen and heard from people and that studies have shown is that people are going to come to Bellingham just like you or I or any of us for many different reasons. But it's probably not going to be the shelter bed that brings them there. But we hope that the shelter beds are available for us as community members if and when we need them for any one of us. And so, yeah, I think that you bring up, I'm glad that you framed that question in that way, because that is it's a real question that comes up often in these conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess as much as I'm an adult and I can have a little bit of sense of awareness, I truly, really, really worry about the kids in our neighborhood who are on their bikes and who are walking to their friends' houses and who, living in our neighborhoods in the lettered streets or Columbia or surrounding, there are so many parks and they should be able to access those parks on any given day, and a parent should be able to feel comfortable. And it really worries me that a child won't have the confidence or the, sort of might be caught off guard, or a group of children, not because, again, an individual is on purpose making them uncomfortable or doing something that's actually unsafe, because it's more of a mental health issue. But I am trying to, maybe I'm going to the worst possible space, but I am trying to prevent like that story. I'm thinking I have to, as someone who also works, like I said, with social services and youth mental health, like thinking about the prevention, like the risk. I can't help but think about that risk.
So I think one thing that I would want to just add to that, just for us to consider, is as we look up, as we talk with the police about our calls and call volume and the reasons that people call the police for things around base camp currently, the top 4 things are not so much they're not dealing with assaults, they're not dealing with any sort of that significant sort of, I guess, criminal sort of behavior that we may generally categorize in that. Their follow-up on, the number one thing is follow-ups on reports and investigations, assisting citizens. So this could be our neighbors calling for an assist in some way, extra patrol, as well as trespass. And so currently we only have 9 people officially trespassed from base camp, which is, I think, a pretty incredible number, considering the number of people that consistently access the facility. It goes to show that, we do take that seriously, and we're really working with people to regain services and have those wraparound services so they can gain access again. But those 4 things constitute a wide majority of the calls that are had. And so I hear the concern, and I think it can be helpful sometimes to put that into perspective for the call volume, or why generally we would need to call the police.
Yeah, I would just say, I can totally appreciate that. And again, I don't believe most of these individuals could purposely, when I've been uncomfortable, and I know, as an adult, kind of how to make distance with myself, but explain that to the parents if something happens to their child, that statistically, it's the call volumes have been low. I can't press that enough, because if I don't say something and extra precautions aren't taken, and it's just I I don't even think that individual, I can imagine they would be, you know, in a better place in their mental state, might be like, oh my gosh, I would never want to scare or, you know, hurt or anything someone else. But that's just where I'm at. And I'm also concerned about the ratio of staff to people, because you know, in the evenings, what happens when like is our community supposed to call the mission instead of the police? And I think that, like, I don't know, and I don't know what resources are the police going to feel overwhelmed by these resources. Do they have added support on their end? And I also think, like, it's not, you're right, it's not a police issue if it's a social worker that needs to be out there, but they're getting the call, or a mental health specialist or someone else. Like, is it the right people in the right spot doing the right things? That's, you know, like, I'm not going to comment on the architecture. I'm not an architect. And I wouldn't, you know, although I can understand the aesthetic of interests in how it looks in the community, but I would never, you know, so I'm just like, yeah, are the right people doing the right work at the right time? And are those resources appropriately allocated? That's my question.
So I was just going to say real quickly, Allie, I know that Moonwater, we probably need to move on to somebody else. But Allie, you are bringing up a huge, wide range complexity of questions and issues around, like, how do we respond to people that are on the streets as well? And so I want to acknowledge, like, that is a real, like, huge community conversation we do need to be having. And I won't venture down that road right now, but that is a good one to continue to lean into for all of us. And then I also think one of the things that I'm hearing from you is addressing parents as well. And as a parent of toddlers myself, and one on the way as well, I really appreciate those concerns about safety and wanting to make sure our kids are safe in the community and accessing those parks too. And I think one thing that as a follow-up that I would like to do is talk with the police specifically about those sorts of crimes or dangers in relation to this population that we're currently talking about, and just trying to gain some level of perspective and help that inform some of our decision making as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks for listening. I think my last thought is any more outreach that you guys can do to make sure. I was actually surprised that only 100 people were attending, just as an informational listening session. So the greater outreach, I think there's a responsibility for all of us in the community to know what's going to happen, but we need, and, you know, ask the right questions so that we can have our assurances, but we also need to know that the gatherings are happening. So I just hope that the more, I would say the more outreach you can do to get bring more people in, the better, because ultimately that's going to make us all understand a little bit more, and hopefully get more people on board with what work is going to happen, and know how to respond if there is an issue, or support what you are doing.
Thank you, Allie, and thank you, Bridget. I appreciate your input very much. We have Anya, I'm not sure if you're raising your hand. We have about 10 minutes left, and I know there's 3 more people who have questions. So if everyone could just be aware of that that limited time that we have, and we'll try to make sure we hear these final 3 folks. Anya?
Yeah, just really quick. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to jump in quickly from the city's perspective, as a project manager, someone who's taking in a lot of the comments and reading them and individually responding to them. I know the applicants have done a really extensive and great job replying to the public safety concerns, but I just want to make sure that folks in the community feel like the city also hears that, and we have all the same goals in mind. Public safety is a priority for the city, and so it's not just the mission's responsibility. It's also our responsibility to make sure that we're considering the impacts or perceived or real impacts of a project in the community. And that's one of the things that we've mentioned, the conditions with the project. So I just want to reiterate that the code has kind of built that in to the interim housing code has built in some of those conditions. But in addition to that, every project is really unique. And so we have the authority and the responsibility to make sure that we're considering any additional unique conditions that might be required for the purposes of public safety, especially. And I just wanted to say also, just to remind folks, I know that there's a lot of concerns about homelessness in the community as a whole, and that just to remember that the applicants are not solely responsible for all of the real or perceived impacts in the community. They are responsible for the operation of the facility, and they have authority over the individuals on the premises. And they're obviously have talked about other initiatives outside of the facility as well. But just to keep things in perspective, that we can't also hold this one applicant responsible for a much bigger issue that has impacts, outside just this one facility. So just to keep those things in mind, and also I just wanted to remind you that we're open to all public comments, and we're happy to continue answering those questions.
Thank you for that input, Anya. Jack, can you confirm, do we have Brian up next?
Yes, Brian is up next.
All right. So Brian, if you can join us. And just a reminder, we have just about 10 minutes and I think three folks. Hi, Brian. Well, hello, two of you. Welcome.
Yeah. This is Brian. And we are neighbors of the mission. We live right up the street next to Leonard Street's Coffee here. And we are so happy to be neighbors with you. And we really appreciate that the work you do and the services you provide for us when we need them in the community. And that we are a part of that, right? We are people inside of this community too. We have a 2.5-year-old as well. And we love that she gets to have neighbors who have houses and neighbors who don't. And that she gets to see the work that you're doing to rebuild systems and fill in the gaps of systems that haven't served well all of our community members. So thank you for that work. We're curious how we know that you have a really robust volunteer program, and there's so many various ways to enter into that work and to join you in this work. And we're curious if there's any particular ways that we can be good neighbors to you in this season as you build and as you transition into this new project.
That's thank you for we enjoy being part of this community as well. So thank you for saying that. The best ways to get involved is typically through our volunteering. The volunteers, I should say prior to COVID, we would have around 1,100 unique volunteers a year participating. And oh man, is it a huge help. When COVID occurred, we had to cut that down almost all the way, which was a really sad thing for us because, for example, our shower trailer is highly volunteer operated. We have a staff and then volunteers helping operate it, and we couldn't operate this last year. Broke our hearts that way. But as COVID is lessening, the volunteerism we're starting to kick it off again as people are vaccinated and all this. And so we're pleased to bring volunteers back in. I know the staff are beside themselves that we're actually getting volunteers back. It is such a huge support. And honestly, you get to rub shoulders with folks that are coming from different walks of life. And it's a great joy to really see clearly the humanity of people that are coming through our doors. So yeah, I'd encourage you, hop on our website, click the volunteer link, and we have a new volunteer system actually that's making it a lot easier to plug in, and you'll see all the different ways you can participate that are a good fit for you and your family. Easy ways, of course, the big Christmas and Thanksgiving meals, just a one-off kind of thing. But if you're in the neighborhood, I mean, you could come down way more. So we'd love to have you. A fun way to get involved. I know you're next to Letter Street's Cafe, and we don't want to create competition, but we do have a cafe in our base camp called Cafe Renovari, and it's a ton of fun to be giving people coffee that are in need and having some pretty cool conversations. So yeah, I would encourage you, plug in and volunteer, advocate for the mission, hop online. If you see, sometimes there's misperceptions out there. If you see those misperceptions, comment on it, state what your experience has been when you've been volunteering and you've met with people and talked with people and all that. That's a big help for us. And of course too, and I've said this before, we are privately funded, so any sort of financial fuel to help keep this project going is encouraged as well. But one of the best ways I'd say is just volunteer. That is probably number one.
Awesome. Yeah, and to add to that too, thank you for bringing up Kids Around the Mission as well. There are opportunities for whole families. So if there are parents and families watching tonight too, there are opportunities for entire families to volunteer, and especially in the serving of meals, that's a really easy way to kind of slowly enter into that process and have some really good conversations and meet some really amazing people. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks, Hans. Thank you, Annie and Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Bridget, you answered my follow-up question before I even asked it. So thanks.
All right, thank you both. And I think we have, let's see, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it Marilee who's next up in the queue? Yes. We just have about 4 minutes or so. So thank you for your patience, Marilee, and if you can join us now. Welcome, Marilee. If you can unmute yourself. And if you'd like to share your video, you're welcome to.
Or wait, okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay.
Welcome.
I thought nobody's really commented on the idea of the 3 storefronts in the design in the new mission building, which I think is really a neat idea. And I was wondering if you could elaborate more on that. Is this like if you could elaborate on the businesses down below.
Okay, thank you. Hans, can you field that question?
Well, thanks, Mom, for asking that question. That's
okay.
my mom, everybody. Giving me the softball question. I didn't ask you to do it. So the one of the problems we're trying to solve with that is folks that are coming in out of significant homelessness and experiencing recovery and coming back to life in many ways. It's hard sometimes to get a job, especially if you have a felony in your background or you don't have a work history. And so this would really provide people those work histories. Those businesses would be likely set up as LLCs profits would go to the mission, of course, but it would be a for-profit enterprise. And they would be designed like people had to show up on time, you got to produce. It's meant to really help people transition into normal work life. So yeah, it's the businesses, we haven't determined yet what those businesses are going to be. They could be partnerships in the community. They could be things we set up ourselves. We've been talking with some potential partners, but we're not going to say what those are just yet. But one of the desires with these businesses is to really create an integration between people in homelessness and people in the mainstream. And one of the successes we've seen down in Seattle where that occurs is at Pike Place Market, top tourism spot. You can see the fish getting thrown. You can see the cheese curds getting made, or the Russian pastries getting made. And it's a popular tourist spot to come. And there's all sorts of street buskers and homeless around as well, yet it works. People feel a sense of connection and belonging, and it really works there. And so, especially, you know, as the future of the Parbury properties likely develop, we feel like this will be a real asset to the neighborhood. So not just for the people that are coming out of recovery programs and getting back into the workforce, but also for the neighborhood as a whole. So great question, Mom. Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And also, as in the design on the top 2 floors, I thought facing the water, if you could have balconies up there, because looking at the water, I think really can help people that are going through stressful and emotional times. There's a lot of peace. So if you could consider putting in balconies or up on the top 2 floors as well. And a fireplace in there like Cabela's has somewhere in the building.
I'm with you on the fireplace. Absolutely. We're that's actually in the plans to put a fireplace, kind of a 2-way fireplace from the common area inside to the outdoor area, so people can enjoy the fire. That's actually a pretty popular thing for people coming off the street too, to enjoy a good fire. But it'll be closed and gas and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Thank you, Marilee. Thank you. Thank you, Hans. I think we have just about come to the end of the evening tonight, and I believe there's one more person in the queue who may have already had a chance to speak. So if you would be willing to email any follow-up questions, and if there's anyone else that hasn't raised their hands, but come up with some questions in later tonight during the coming days. I know that some emails had already been put in chat, and maybe they could be reposted to chat just as a refresher for folks. And Ali, are there any closing comments that you or others would like to make? And thank you so much, everyone, for coming this evening and sticking with us.
Thank you, Moonwater. I'll ask Hans if he wants to say anything, but before doing so, just real briefly, I want to thank you for moderating this meeting and for facilitating the discussion. And I want to thank the city staff for participating with a little bit more staff commitment than we would typically have. We know this is a big project and there's a diverse set of issues. And so having more staff here listening to the community is really important. And I really want to thank the community members who participated. I personally am involved in a number of neighborhood meetings. And while I recognize that like a lot of these issues are emotional, and that there's a lot of real concern and legitimate comments are made, I truly appreciate the tone of the discussion tonight and feel like everybody engaged in a really strong, positive dialogue and expressed those concerns in a way that allowed us to some substantive response. And so I just want to thank everybody for that, because I know this was a long night. So just based on my experience, I felt like this was a really constructive meeting from our perspective. And so again, and thank you, Moonwater. I don't know, Hans, if you want to say one last thing, but we will be available for follow-up. So as Moonwater said, if anybody has any follow-up whatsoever as this project proceeds, please do not hesitate to contact Jack or the Lighthouse or Anya, and we'll do what we can to facilitate that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll piggyback on that, Ali. I really appreciate this dialogue. There are some really good things brought up. And so we're going to take that stuff to heart and really think through this and make sure that this thing is the best that it can be. So thank you for that. If you have more questions, or there may be even questions you haven't even thought of, we did write up a frequently asked questions list and answers. And you can see it on our website. I think Jack just put it into the chat there. So yeah, feel free to click that link and maybe read through some of those questions that might stir up some other questions. We really want to be able to respond to that. At the end of the day, we really we want to break barriers. We want to transform lives, and we want to build this community together. And it takes us all. And so I just want to say thank you for taking the time, because this is your evening. It was actually a nice evening. So I know it was a sacrifice. So we appreciate you. And I want to give you a personal invitation to, we highly value relationship, not just with our guests, but with our neighbors. And so we really do want to invite you to come see for yourselves the incredible work that's happening at Base Camp or in our Ascent or Agape Home programs, or join us on the electric scooters, passing out coffee to downtown folks. Join us, link arms with us. And even if you don't like that idea, just visit with us, because I think there's a lot of strength in having strong relationships with your neighbors. So we invite that and encourage that. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hans. Thank you everyone for coming. And I think that brings our meeting to a close. All right, have a lovely evening. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.